Hello and welcome to the Bitcast. My name is Ainsley and I'll be your host today. To my left, right, whatever side that is of course Dan. And below me is playing the roles of both Tie Guy Travis and Hoeg Law Travis. So he'll be debating himself today and I look forward to the festivities. In all honesty, people, Ains is in points unknown, although I think he's announcing himself in Pennsylvania in the chat right now for family business. Michael Corleone style. So you're stuck with the three of us, and I drew the short straw to host for you all. So, or maybe you did if you're in the chat or otherwise listening. Dan, how are you doing this morning?
Man, I'm awake, so that's
Hey, I always consider that a victory.
Yeah,
we're starting pretty close to on time.
Yeah,
Dan's awake.
Yeah.
We're fired up about talking about video games.
Yep.
Maybe we won't run this episode to 2.5 hours.
We'll I got 3 Dr. Peppers all lined up, ready to go.
Is that the level of caffeine you need this morning?
Yep, a little bit.
All right, fantastic. And Mr. Tie Guy himself, in a tie, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. As you know, I draw all of my strength from you guys disappearing. Like as you age out of the show, I my youth absorbs your power. As you know from Dan not being on the show in previous weeks, and so
that was a whole vampiric thing. I didn't realize, honestly.
Yeah. And so
I've only been on the show for 6 months. I signed up. Nothing was told to me about giving my life force to Travis.
Yeah. Well, it's not really something I tell you.
Okay.
Whoops. Yeah.
It's a good surprise for October.
I'm good. Things are good, man.
You're doing good? You're playing some games?
I'm playing a lot of games, man. I'm currently working on 2 reviews. I got a 3rd review that's going live tomorrow that I finished a while ago. So yeah, and then preview stuff and a lot of stuff going on.
Well, as you probably saw from the actual Ainsley created thumbnail, we're going to be talking about VR today. We're going to be talking about a few controversies that popped up in the world of video games, including whether or not 30 frames per second is acceptable to our eyeballs in the year of our Lord 2022. Whether the price of a VR headset should ever exceed $1,000 if you want market penetration in really any market. And we also have something added to the outline today. We got some other stuff to talk about as well that came up after Ains had created our show for us because he doesn't trust us to decide on our own topics. And that is, of course, a little bit of controversy about voice acting, witches, naked hair coverings, and all things Bayonetta. So that'll probably come up. We'll talk about that a little bit. Before we do, though, Dan, your college football team sucks.
Yeah, they do.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I don't know what to do anymore. I mean, I have to watch.
I don't know what you should be doing
Thursday, and then so I'm just going to roll with the Cubs, which is not the best idea, but I'm just going to stick with these guys because they're not playing, so they can't lose.
That's right. You could have been rolling with the Dodgers. They had a bad night. And this has concluded our sports section of the seasoned gaming Bitcast because Travis was about to fall asleep on us, or just
with it goes the power I absorbed from Ains. So.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have fun. We will have Ains back next week. We will mention that again at the end of the episode. Although, because he is a world traveler, he will be appearing remotely. So get excited for that and technological difficulties because those are always fun. Dan, outside of Hitman, what have you played in the last week?
Man,
Judge.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I played Hitman, and you know what I did this week? I got the platinum for Hitman finally. I been throwing that out.
I didn't even know if that was possible.
Yeah, I finally did it, and then I also got the banana, so that's good. A lot of excited people about that. But I've been playing Judgment, kind of going back and. I don't remember anything about it, to be honest with you. I think I did the review for Season Gaming, and I don't remember any of the story, which is a good thing because it was kind of like a new game. So it was nice. I'm still playing it. And short of that, that's pretty much it. I'm waiting for Plague Tale, man. That's my next
Plague's Tale, right? Which is very shortly, yes?
It comes out on Tuesday.
Yeah.
You can read my review tomorrow at 4 a.m. on IGN.com.
Is it okay if I don't get up at 4 a.m. just to read your review?
You don't have to get up at 4 a.m.
Okay, all right.
Actually, you know what? I'm thinking of a different review that has a 4 a.m. embargo. I think it's at 8 a.m. tomorrow or 9 a.m. So sorry, I've got a lot of balls in the air right now. So
you do. You got some reviews coming. So Travis, that's a great segue into what are you playing? How many of the games have to go in like that the Disney announcements for movies where it's just unannounced title, versus
none
what
of
you can
them,
actually talk about?
Yeah, none of them are unannounced title. I can say I've played all of them. I just can't talk about any of them in any capacity. So
All right. Well, the
games I've
following
been
is a
playing-
list of things Travis can't actually subjectively
Yes.
opine on in this episode.
So yeah, I've gone from review to review, and then in the most recent case, had to stop my review to work on a different review because of an emergency situation that arose, where somebody couldn't handle the review. So, in order, I finished playing A Plague Tale: Requiem a couple weeks ago. I wrote my review. It's just been sitting, waiting for the embargo to
You
go
finished
up on
a couple
it.
weeks ago, so they must have got
Yeah.
back to you early. Okay.
They got the review code early, and I just finished it, and it's just been locked and loaded and waiting to go for a while. So I did that. Then I started working on my next review, which was Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed, which is an asymmetric Ghostbuster game where 4 people play Ghostbusters and 1 person plays the ghost, and it's
kind of like Evil Within.
Kind of like Evil Within, except for it's the reverse. The ghost is,
or
is
you know what I meant, not Evil Within.
No, you're right. The
Raimi.
Evil Dead, the game. Evil Dead, the game where the monster is hunting the people. Instead, it's the people hunting the ghost, and the ghost is the person hiding and kind of trying to get away. So it's kind of the reverse formula. I can't talk about that one except to say that I got about halfway through that game, and then somebody had life stuff come up, and they could not do their review of Gotham Knights. And so for the past half of a week, I've been playing Gotham Knights, and that review is going up also this week, I think on Thursday at 4 a.m. That's the 4 a.m. one.
I don't even know what the release date for Gotham Knights is.
I think it's this Friday. This Friday. So my review goes live on Thursday morning. I'm not finished. I need to write it probably tomorrow. So I've been doing that. So there, lots of stuff going on. I can't talk about any of it, but I'll be able to talk about Plague Tale starting tomorrow. And I'm very excited about it.
It should be, everybody else should be super excited, because when Travis posts his reviews on IGN, especially for bigger games, the replies are just outstanding.
They are, and they're always considered and reasonable, just like I have found on the internet this week. Always just a bastion of reason, logic, and discourse that I'm glad exists. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to also popping into Travis comments, because it is a little bit of a pastime for me.
Yeah, me too.
It's pretty fun. I must be the only person on this chat who doesn't go and look at my comments.
Oh man, that's great.
No, I can't mind them. I can't mind them, but no, they are amusing. I do recall having a lovely almost hour, I think, going through your comments to something random. It was like the DLC to Far Cry 6, which I just thoroughly enjoyed, because they really pilloried.
That's right. That one did read. That one was crazy to me, because I think they were saying that the villain in Far Cry 5 was the best one, which shocked me. I was just like, wait, what? That's like the worst one. Like I didn't know that there were stands for the villain. That's the one from Montana. The Christian dude.
Joseph Seed or something. Yeah.
Joseph Seed. That's his name.
Seed,
yeah. With the trivia. No, so I really do take a lot of enjoyment from popping in and seeing what people think about Travis at a personal level for his video game review.
It's fantastic.
They are.
My
favorite ones are just like the, hey, Travis, like F you. Like that's it. That's all they put in there. Like nothing else.
They just curse at me. No elaboration.
Right to the point.
Yeah.
I prefer that too.
I do not agree with your existence, fellow man. Sorry.
Exactly. They're the best.
It's fantastic.
Did any of you pop in to one of the Game Pass releases this week called Scorn?
No.
I explicitly did not pop into it because my good friend Leanna, she did the review for IGN, and it was not my type of game based off of what she wrote in her review. And I was just, I actually do want to play that game when I have time, but looks rough. Looks real rough.
It's an interesting one. And I have to give my full biases and disclaimers here, is that, I've talked about my past a little bit, certainly in that interview I did with Ains. But I sponsored the Easy Allies, the podcast out west, for a little while when they had sponsorships. And one of the main sponsors that stuck with me for like the big chunk of time was Scorn. And Scorn always had the same kind of read, and it was, discover a world of odd forms and somber tapestry. And this is, of course, like 2016, 2017, 2018.
Wow. They were running ads back then?
Yeah, no, absolutely. They were sponsoring the Easy Allies with me, and we used to have ads essentially right next to each other. And so I have a certain amount of kinship with those folks. It's like, it's a smallish development team. They took years to make this thing. And you pop into it. Because I did. This is one of the things I played this week. You pop in and it is just no hand holding at all. You're just in a gross, fleshy thing. And then, it's got combat, and I kind of wish it didn't. I kind of wish it was just like one of those old CD-ROM adventure games from
like Myst.
Yeah, something like Myst. Well, I mean, really grotesque Myst, but like
it's a puzzle game, which I dig puzzle games with no context or story or that sort of thing. That sounds cool, but it's the kind of the other stuff that was mentioned, especially I have a friend who's playing through it, Ebontis, on the other show, and he was like, this game's not very good. And then he got to the final act with combat and he was like, okay, F this game. Like he was just like so aggressively upset about the game because they add combat at the end, like first person shooter mechanics, and apparently it's just awful. So
I think it is one of those games, especially early on when you start it, that would have been greatly aided by being in the age of the instruction manual. Like I recall these kinds of games that are just, I say CD-ROM because they used to just make games that are like kind of 3D photography, and then you hit up or left or right, and it kind of just goes to the next photo, and you have these kinds of interactions. I remember one that I really loved that was based on Rendezvous with Rama that I really liked, but it was because of that format, you're really not going to engage in first person. You actually have to figure out what you're going to do for a puzzle game, and in this one, I think it's just a little bit too obtuse. Like you are kind of wondering what you're doing. It's slow walking. The graphics are cool. I mean, you're on a Geiger planet person temple thing. But I tend to agree. I read IGN's review, and I'm looking forward to playing it more. But it doesn't grab you right off the bat. And I feel bad because I was looking forward to it. And
what's the horror factor on it? Like
the horror factor is not.
I think it's a gross factor. Yeah, I don't think it's.
That's a gross factor. It's more like this is an icky place to be. This is unpleasant. It's walking into the crime scenes in Saw more than it is actually thinking the killer's behind the closet door. Okay. Right? I mean, it's. That's a technical term. You can use that one in one of your reviews, Travis.
I'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually think I could use that in a review.
You have to figure out yeah. So, it's Game Pass. I really do like the Game Pass service for killing that barrier to entry, killing that monetary expenditure on this kind of stuff. But it did bounce off me a little bit. I feel bad about that.
Yeah, it always is disappointing to see a game that kind of intrigued you flop a little or not hit it as hard as I think a lot of people were staking their hopes on this, which I never really understood. I was sort of, I think
evocative. It's evocative in a way that a lot of games aren't.
It's evocative, and I think it was the Xbox, presentation effect. It was included in a couple of Xbox's like big E3 replacement presentations, and it was on Game Pass, and so I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is going to be, a Ragnarok competitor or whatever for the fall," and I just don't think it is that. So I'm interested to check it out, but yeah, the things I've seen of it kind of make me go, "Oh no!"
It's worth a check out. And I re-downloaded Plague's Tale: Innocence because I wanted to get in front of that because I think I may be misremembering this. I think I only got like 3/4 of the way through it.
Oh my God! You have to play the end of that game because that game gets really weird in the last like quarter or whatever. And if you don't have that context for how weird it gets, Requiem is going to really surprise you. You're gonna be like, wait, what? Is this just a completely different game? Like you have to.
All right, I'm an interdimensional wizard or something. All right, no, I don't remember anything. I think I actually got about 3/4 of the way through because I remember kind of just getting, I guess, a little bit bored with the dynamic. Like it was mostly kind of the same. So if it has some kind of big, at least lore or world building twist, I don't know it. So I must have not played it.
It doesn't just have a lore or world building twist; it has a gameplay twist too.
Okay.
And like, okay, so I guess I should say this for people who haven't played Innocence. You can play 2 without having played 1, but you're going to have to accept certain things that, like, if you didn't play 1, you're not going to see the lead up to the stuff that happens in 2. And if you didn't finish 1, you're going to be like, wait, this is not how I remember things working in the first game. And yeah, I would just say probably finish one if you did.
Worth it to
Dan,
put that
Dan, you
time
finished
in.
it, right? It sounds like.
Yeah, I finished it. Yeah, I did the
Okay, so
review.
you know what I'm referring to.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, folks. It's worth it to finish the first one.
It is worth it. I think
it
you would be very much benefited from knowing how one ends to really understand why things are crazy in two.
I recall enjoying it. I recall respecting it more than loving it at the time, insofar as this is a smaller team, and it's like, oh, they got a kind of AAA looking thing out of it, but I did get a little bit bored. So we'll see. I will go back to that. That sounds like a great plan. Anything else anybody's playing or that anybody wants to talk about? Because Ains usually squeezes 45, 55 minutes out of this, but I think it's mostly because I'm a blowhard and I just take up 20 minutes of talking about myself in this section.
Yeah. I mean, why don't you? What other games have you been playing?
I mean, that's basically all I've been playing this week. I tried Scorn. I've had some stuff going on online. We've had some sports ball to watch, including playoff baseball and football. Everything else is just chill.
Nice.
So I can't speak to a lot of video games. We're doing great, aren't we, Ains?
Yeah.
Somewhere Ains is shaking his head.
We got one person who platinumed Hitman, one person who doesn't want to talk about video games, and then me who's played a lot and can't talk about any of it. Those are our three situations here.
Your season gaming Bitcast, folks. Please leave a like and subscribe. Ains really appreciate that. Ains actually has some things I'm supposed to talk about. For instance, apparently we just hit 15,000 subs at Season Gaming, which is really, really awesome and is a significant increase just in the last few months from where we were at. So thank you, everyone who's not just liked and subscribed here, but also folks that have shared it with their friends, have told other people, have put it in forums and online and said, these guys are idiots. You should watch them, because we like hate watching just as much as like watching, because YouTube can't tell the difference.
It's true. Yeah. So, in fact, if you like us, you should tell your friends. And if you don't like us, you should tell your enemies. That'll show them, because, we equally good.
Travis has already said he's impervious to bad comments. So
I really am. I don't care about anybody's opinion. It's actually kind of a superpower.
That's why we had him on the show, man. It's the best.
Yeah. Hoeg, your co-counsel has said that you played Grounded this week. So I'd like a Grounded update personally.
I have been playing Grounded. I really appreciate that, honey. That's awesome. Grounded is great. Grounded is fantastic. I think personally that Grounded is too hard for my liking as a solo. As an adult, it's sometimes trickier for me to get people to come in with me. And so I'm mostly playing Grounded solo, and I can do my base building. I can do what I like in that game, which is kind of figuring out where things are. It was really great to have a breakthrough of figuring out how to get grubs. That was wonderful. Nice moment. But outside of that, it's like actually going and pursuing some of the dungeon paths and dealing with some really menacing things is a bit tough for a solo. I'm sure that you can go online and find somebody making, 6-7 minute clips of them just one-shotting praying mantises and spiders and everything else. There you go. Travis is already working on it. It's like shields, poke, throw, bow, whatever. But that isn't me yet. And I think to get to whatever that skill hump is, I might just be happy with my tiny little fort and call it I played Grounded. Don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I implore you to push through to the next area, because it honestly, like, there are the kind of the loop of the game is you just power through this amazing threshold, and then you reach like a point of power. You're like, I'm comfortable. And then you start to look on the horizon to the next thing, and you're like, oh my God. And you feel like you're back down at the bottom, and then you go up that next hump and you get to the next power level and you build your fort even more crazy. And it just keeps doing that to you. Every time you think you've conquered the yard, you look one way and you go, wait, what is that? Oh no. And then, you have to get even better. So
it is fun.
It's such a cool game. Yeah.
One of my favorite bits of that is this notion of leaving the fort. And it really does capture this feeling of, okay, we got to stock up. We're going on an adventure. You feel like you're in The Hobbit. You got to get everything in your backpack just so. And we're going to try to get over there. And it seems 16 miles away. And we got to try to arrive in some semblance of health and supplies. and that's a good time. I Grounded is great, but I'll try to power through it. I don't.
Yeah.
It's not going to be one I drop because it's just you could just pop in and kind of know what's
Exactly.
going
You don't
on.
have to kind of commit to it, which I actually really appreciate. So I actually also played some Grounded this week. I totally forgot about this.
Oh yeah.
My fiance and I are still kind of in the back of our minds like, oh, we want to get back and do more of it. And so we found a couple hours last weekend, and we now have this big fort that kind of winds around the major oak tree in the game. It's just like this big, it kind of like has stairs and it just wraps around the oak tree.
I have
And
nothing like that.
We built a spire on top of it that just goes, it's a spiral staircase that just goes like super high, and there's no build height limit in Grounded. And so you can just go ridiculously high. So we went up to like one of the big branches, and then we built a way station of platforms that just zip lines all across the map to any area so that we can get to any area on the map and then back without having to walk or explore.
Deal
You
with
can
the
just
adventuring.
zip to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds
And
like
it's
me
just
on-
like, yeah, it's crazy.
It sounds like me on Death Stranding. Like that's what I absolutely adored about Death Stranding was figuring out. I was like, all right, how can I? Once you set up a full-on transportation system in that game, it's like, oh, I could do your quest. we're just gonna get on the transport. So all right, I don't have zip lines, Travis. I don't have.
Yeah.
I have very limited resources. I have
You don't really need zip lines right now. Your point in the game, though. You're not like
sad camp that I love. That I have wall sconces that light up. It's lovely. I have a series of construction sites that have grass blades, so it looks a little bit like you're at a local factory depot because it's got just
nice
lines of grass blades around it. I've started adding fencing, but it is ultimately just a grass square with a smoothie machine. So it's my little home. I'm happy with it, but I don't have spires and zip lines.
Yeah, you'll get there if you keep playing eventually. It's like it's just, the game is so good at just like pushing you to the next, like what if we did this? What if we went crazy, y'all? What if we did it? It's cool. So, and it keeps surprising me. There's still more stuff I keep finding. I'm like, oh my god, like there's still stuff in this backyard I haven't found yet. So, yeah,
it is cool.
Back to it.
A lot of cool stuff to see. No, I enjoy it. I did play Grounded. That's right. And
thank you, co-counsel.
Yes, thank you, co-counsel. Always. She's very helpful with my memories. But no, I think that's about it. So if everybody's set on what we've been playing, we can move this along with some amount of alacrity.
Yeah. Man, these big words are gonna either pull in a new audience or alienate ours. So I don't know what's gonna happen.
Speediness.
Okay. There you go.
I appreciate the mocking, Dan, though. Keep me real.
No, I love it.
Which brings us to the main topic on our thumbnail, which is how many of us are just going to run out and get our $1,500 Quest Pro. For those of you that didn't see this announcement, Travis is in line. Meta, formerly Facebook, formerly Zucktopia, was announcing various pieces of their VR evolution. Announced something that they had previously called, I want to say, Project Cambria. And they announced their final kind of commercial output for this thing. And they also dropped the fact that it was $1,500. And apparently, what also came out of this particular announcement was that they didn't intend for this necessarily to be aimed at a gaming consumer audience, but had planned to sell it through to enterprise. So the very first question is, you excited about this?
No, and I don't think we're supposed to be excited.
Okay.
I think this was obviously a commercial play in the same way that like people kind of were like, oh, that's interesting at the whole, what was the Windows thing that they were, the HoloLens. Yeah. People were kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And then Microsoft was like, it is interesting, but it's really not for you. And we were like, all right, that makes sense. I think $1,500 price is probably indicative of that more than anything else, that they're not trying to sell it to. There will be a Quest 3, I'm sure, that will be priced reasonably. And I think, if you're the type of person who buys the Quest 3, you probably were never going to buy the Pro really at any price, because the Pro is going to be tethered almost certainly, right? I've got to imagine that it is. And there's other headsets out there that are at the level of the Pro that are similarly priced. I mean, I own the Valve Index, which is a $1,000 headset. That's the price of entry for that unit. And in order to play it, it is both wired to an expensive PC, has to be, and you have to set up two Waystation monitors on either side of your play space to capture the area. It's like they're like motion sensors, right? And so the amount of setup and resources that have to go into it to build it is for a very specific either type of extreme premium gamer who just wants to play like super high end VR games and doesn't care about the price and the lengths you have to go through to make that feasible, or it's made for people who are developing on the VR headset or want or have some sort of work use case. And so what's interesting about the VR space right now is there is no middle. There is ridiculously expensive, and then there's a toy you wear on your head, and that isn't tethered. And I think PSVR2 has a chance to fill that void in the middle. I think also Meta had an opportunity to do it and they didn't, and I think people are kind of probably pissed about that. But it's a very interesting market because there's the consumer market, which is like, in my opinion, as somebody who owns the Valve Index and has done the $5,000 experience of getting that to work. I see that and I go like, oh my God, this is amazing. Everybody should play this, but it's not practical. And then on the other hand, you play the Meta and you're kind of like, all right, this is okay, but it's sort of just like a toy, it's not really full.
The Quest is amazing. I'm no Meta fan here, but it's that untethered nature that makes it amazing. That's the dream.
It is fantastic. I mean, that's such a big pickup. It's just that once you've played the other stuff, Hoeg, I got you to get you out here to San Francisco so you can play the.
Well, by the way, did you see the rumors that Sony had licensed Alex for PSVR2?
I did, and I hope they're true. And even if they're not, people are going to find a way to get Alex on PSVR2 because you can actually already play Alex on the Meta. It's not a good experience, but you can play it because the Meta is a Steam compatible headset. So
if you use its like tethering to your computer.
If you use its tethering to your computer, so you can get it. And I think the PSVR will probably get it, and then finally you guys will be able to understand why I was freaking out 2 years ago.
I look forward to that episode where it's like, man, Travis was right.
Yeah.
It doesn't come up a ton, right?
It doesn't come up a ton, and it was an IGN 10 out of 10. It was one of the only 10s we gave that year. And I think game of the year easily. So it's kind of funny.
There you go. No, so as far as I understand it, just in terms of like correctives and understanding what they're doing here with Meta, the Quest Pro, as I understand it, is untethered. And primarily the technology behind it is the Quest 2s. That its upgrades are for the hardware. So the optics are better. The pixel density is higher. They do something called, I think, like mixed color augmented reality. So it's not, that black and white screen from Quest. But apparently, I think they're using the Quest name as untethered, as like that's what it means. You think Quest, you think that you're free from the.
Yeah, and my guess would be that's why it's $1,500 and not $1,000, because the $1,000 price point has sort of been like it's high end, it's really good, and it is tethered, and so this is our first really high end untethered headset. So
yeah, and I wanted to ask you about this, and maybe Dan, you would have an opinion on this. One of the problems I have with what they've done here is if it's for enterprise, it's not for consumers. I think that the Pro naming convention has been kind of used up in this space because this is what PlayStation calls their upgrades. And this is what we usually think of just as our colloquial way of stating consumer upgrade half step between generations. Do you think Meta Quest Pro, when Meta Quest 2 is their consumer product, is confusing, a good idea, a bad idea? Because it jumped out at me as seeming consumer focused with the Pro name that we're used to seeing to us.
Yeah, I have a lot of problems. Well, I have a lot of problems with Meta just in general, but especially the way that they're doing this. I think both the Quest name and the Pro name are bad ideas. Okay. I get that they're using Quest to mean untethered, but unfortunately, the Quest is a known product in the consumer market, and people are automatically going to assume that you're trying to sell it to them if you call it the Quest. And then the Pro on top of that adds further confusion to the market because, as you pointed out, gamers are used to hearing Pro as the elite version of whatever they're trying to buy. And so it's a terrible name overall. I get what they're doing immediately when I see it, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me, a guy who plays a lot of VR and gets kind of what the market looks like. But to the average person, they're going to go, oh, so there's this $250 version I think they're selling it for now, $299, and a $1,500 version that is not very clear on kind of why it's better, or, who it's for or anything like that. And I think that is a serious problem. I also think the PSVR2 is going to come in and just kick its ass, because I foresee it either being, a $1,000 kind of competitor to the Valve Index, except for it doesn't require you to also have like a $3,000 PC, or being that middle player where it comes out and surprises everyone and it's like $600 and people are like, oh, that's interesting, something like that. So we'll see if they're able to hit that. I doubt it, but we'll see. I have a feeling that at this point it feels like PlayStation needs a win, and I think they're probably going to come in, and if they're able to do that, I mean, the VR market is huge, as anyone who has played Beat Saber knows, and that's like, that's, I think that's keeping Meta in business at this point. I'm excited, man. I was not a believer in VR. Like, I was bad mouthing VR for like 5 years, because I was just like, dude, I've played all those games that they kind of suck. They're demos. That's what they felt like to me, like tech demos. And then I played Half-Life Alyx, and I was like, okay, I take it all back. Like, this is real, So
I really like VR. My tilt is that I'm a VR dreamer on this stuff, and I enjoy it.
What games do you like? Because I know you haven't played Alyx. What are the things that make you believe in it?
In VR? Well, I mean, I think you'd probably describe them as demos, right? So I really like the Star Wars thing that they did with Darth Vader
Immortal.
Yeah, I really like what they did, what actually Rocksteady did right at the top with their Arkham thing, which is like an hour and a half. But it's
that one really feels like a demo to me. Vader Immortal, it gets close to feeling like a game, but yeah, I still was sort of a pessimist on that one.
To me, you're paying a very small amount for what amounts to, like theme park level immersion, if you do it right. And so that's kind of like where it lives to me. And so I really enjoyed those. I really enjoyed some of the early stuff, but Battlezone, I really liked. I really enjoyed a game that I don't know how many people have played called The Invisible Hours, which was done in VR, and you just follow people around a house and watch mysteries and solve them and those kinds of things. It's not really a game. I'm sure that you would say it isn't, but it is an interactive experience that was like just really enjoyable and immersive, and that was cool, right? Like, that's something different. I don't find
played. Have you played? Was it? I think You Should Die. I Expect You to Die.
Oh yeah, sure. Sure. I really like those. They were a little too simple. So
they're a little too simple, but they feel more like games to me. Like, I think.
Oh, they're definitely games. Yeah. But I wish it were more complicated. That game.
Did you play the sequel?
I did not.
Expect You to Die too. Yeah. So that one, I think that one gets a little more complicated. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, since I played Half-Life Alyx, I then got into more VR, and I played stuff like A Sandwich Tale and Demio and some other stuff. And I've been like, okay, I was wrong. Like, there are some good games here. There's some art here for sure. But yeah, I still think that we're waiting for, Valve, their whole thing is they take forever to come up with a game, but when they do come up with a game, you're like, oh, so this is what games will be like in like 8 years. You know what I mean? Like, this is the potential for they kind of are the pathfinder. And so I see Half-Life Alyx as like a ticking time bomb. Everybody's looking at that game and going, so like, let's do that. Like, how do we get to be able to build that level of experience? And so I'm really hopeful that, in maybe 4 or 5 more years, we'll be at the point where every game is at that level, and that is just kind of expected from the industry. But yeah, I'm excited, man. I'll probably buy the Pro, actually, the Quest Pro, because I've been waiting for a high-end VR headset that is untethered. And if I'm able to use it, if I'm able to wirelessly link it with my PC, connect it to Steam and do stuff like that, or at least gain access to games that are at the level of my Valve Index without the tether, I mean, that's huge. My situation.
I don't think it's got I don't think it's actually got processing.
Got processing stuff. We'll see. I mean, I need to look at the specs. I've not done my research on this because it's been a pretty busy week. But my initial kind of glancing over the announcement was, okay, $1,500, an extra $500 to get another high-end VR headset, except for this one's untethered. I like that. I'm interested.
If
So
you
we'll
go in
see.
on that, Travis, I want reports because I am a VR believer. I love that stuff, and I
I
think
will give you.
Untethered is awesome. But
Yeah,
I
mean,
I do think that the PSVR2 is seeking to have the higher tech, the better technologically advanced games than the
true.
Quest line right now.
If it is tethered, it will be a limited success in my book. And I think they said it is tethered or no?
It is fully tethered. No,
It
I
is
think it's a
fully
mistake.
tethered. That's what I thought. So that I think that's a mistake. And here's the advantage the PSVR 2 will have. Even if it is at a similar price as like the Valve Index, the Valve Index is still more expensive because you have to own a high-end PC. You have to own at least a $2,500 PC. Like that's the minimum you're going to be able to get into to run the games at the level that you would want to run them. So you're not throwing up when you do VR. Like I am prone to do, by the way. My review of No Man's Sky on VR, I've had 2 vomiting sessions during that review.
Nice.
So yeah, it can be brutal if you don't have the right frame rate or tech. Because I reviewed that on the PSVR 1, which is not a good headset. It's just
The
it's
game
too
can
low.
throw you.
The games give me a brain headache and then I throw up. So
you could tell right when the PSVR 1 came out that their tracking wasn't good enough.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you had this
It
kind of
made you feel desynced from your own body. Yeah, it's really
yes.
bad. So I think the PSVR 2's biggest advantage is that you connect it to a PlayStation 5 and not a super expensive PC. That's the advantage. But if they could do that, if they could make it untethered and be in the PlayStation ecosystem, I would be a PlayStation VR main. You know what I mean?
They might need something like Alex. They need something like what I usually consider Avatar was for like 3D movies that completely ran any interest in that technology for like 3 solid years before they gave up on it. It was because it existed. And if you can have something where it's just like, well, you absolutely have to try this, and it takes a PSVR 2. I mean, like that's what it needs. Dan, when are you getting into VR? Are you excited about Quest Pro? Do you already have one on pre-order?
Yes. No. Nope. Okay.
Yes,
So
no.
yeah, my VR experience has been kind of similar to Ains's. We both kind of got the excuse me, PSVR. It went on sale like in 2 or 3 years ago, where it was like you had this huge bundle, and it was like, oh yeah, we're gonna get this. And then initially I was like, man, this is amazing. My son has a Vive. My other son has a Quest. So we kind of a Quest 2 or whatever it is, the newer one. And I've dabbled into stuff. I've done a couple reviews. I've fallen down while wearing a headset, so I can't do that anymore. It was that stupid Spider-Man tech demo where you're like on top of a roof, and I literally turned around like my whole body, and I looked down, and it was the street. You're on top of a building.
I
Right into my couch.
I have a VR hilarious story as well.
Oh man, it was bad news. But I reviewed a few games for the VR. I think Vader was one of them. I think that had a lot of potential. I played. Gosh, what was the one with? It was some kind of bullet game where you had a story.
It was
based in London or London's Sony Studios in London. Did it? I can't remember.
Oh yeah, that's blood and
something. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's Blood and Truth.
Yeah, that might be it. Yeah, that was a fun game. I played it sitting down the entire time. Like I can't play VR standing up.
VR type games. Where I played super gun.
Yes, yes.
It bugs the crap out of me.
Yeah, my hand shakes like that.
Normally,
just in normal.
Yeah. For him, it's immersive.
All right,
immersive. Yeah,
yeah. So it's like this. Not I don't think it interests anybody. Maybe my older son, but I don't think he wants to go that far. And I don't know what the professional use is. Is it like, I saw some stuff I think from Microsoft where it was doing stuff in hospitals with like surgeries and stuff like that. Is that this kind of thing? Is that what it's going for, or is it? Because there's like Travis said, there's a middle ground somewhere, right? And I guess they can go backwards if they wanted to, and it's like, okay, here's our high end stuff. Now we're going to give you like the middle stuff, and then the Quest 2 is going to be the lower end. But I don't know, man. It's one of those things where it's just like, I think it's still a little bit niche, but at the same time, I can see, I enjoy it to a point. You know what had VR? Hitman 3 on PS4.
There you go.
So not great at all, but it was there. So, but yeah, it was pretty bad. But I don't know, man. I'm never been like a huge VR guy. I've enjoyed my time with it. This seems outrageous to me, but I don't
This
know,
is
man.
you right here, right, Dan? This is with the headset on.
Yes,
looking at the stock reports.
I would be on the floor. Actually, that would be me, and probably vomiting.
But you can still see the outside world, right? Like this is one of the sales pitches for the Quest Pro is that it also does that thing that HoloLens used to say, right? It's augmented reality as well.
So it's like Minority Report.
Just see the world. Yeah. They just happen to have floating screens in front of them.
That would be cool, man. I mean, I just don't see. I mean, obviously, $1,500 is a lot of money, especially these days. And so, for those hardcore people like Travis, I think it'd be awesome. I encourage you, if you have $1,500 sitting around, it's probably the best that you're going to be able to get. So, as far as the PSVR2 goes, that's another one. I'm going to be like, let's see what it does. Listen to people like Travis that have the experience before I even start delving into this kind of stuff. Because I'm already
what I'm here for.
Yeah, I'm already. I fall down like just outside of VR sometimes.
We don't have that IGN money, Dan.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody's flush with cash in games journalism. We know this
for sure.
To be fair, this is a work expense.
Yeah.
So I'm not.
Even better. Let's see if I can that one.
Yeah, I can relate with you, Dan. I once while playing Half-Life Alyx, it's a shooter, so you have to search for ammo in the levels, and I got down on all fours to look under the bed and to see if there was some ammo under there, because sometimes they hide it in the world. It's super immersive. And then as I was like, all right, there's no ammo down there, and as I tried to get back up, I tried to push down on the bed to get myself up.
Man.
Yeah, and I just completely went whoonk and just shoulder into the ground. It was so bad, and I was like, of course the bed doesn't exist, you idiot. I just got lost in it. I got caught up in the game. So
do you have one of those treadmills too?
So the thing I have is this area I'm currently recording in is normally a big empty area, and I use it as this is my office. So the other half of the room is a 85-inch TV with all the consoles connected to it and all my recording gear where I do my reviews. And then right here is a big empty area where I do VR, because I clean up this recording station after I'm done doing shows. And my VR thing snakes up to the ceiling, and then the cord hangs down from above me. And so I can basically play without having to worry about the tether. And then I have a big open area where I can kind of do VR. So that's
you have those sensors in the corners of your room and stuff.
Yeah, and then I have the sensors here and there.
My son has that
for VR. Yeah, so I went out of my way. This was actually my COVID project. Everybody else was learning impressive skills and languages and stuff, and I was just setting up my VR setup so that I could do this sort of stuff. So it's definitely not what the average person would play as. And I think that's the big, somebody in the comments, I think we have a super chat that's what's the main thing holding VR back?
Let's talk about it.
And I think we're naturally sort of going into that. I think the big problem is that good VR is unattainable to the average person for a variety of reasons. There's the space reason where you actually need a space to play it. There's the price reason, which is to do VR well, you have to not only pay a lot for the equipment and the hardware that it's connected to, but also the games are pretty expensive. A lot of them that makes it kind of a high barrier of entry. There's just a lot of it, a lot of problems. And then there's the stuff you don't know. When you first start doing VR, it can be off-putting just because setting up VR can be a huge pain in the ass. You don't really understand if you've got a tethered VR machine that's really advanced. You have to figure out the sensor mounting, and you have to figure out how to set up a border for yourself. I think only really the Meta Quest has the user experience nailed down, and I think that's why it's been so successful, because creating a guardian for yourself, as they call it, is super intuitive, and then starting to kind of just jump in and play games is intuitive. The biggest problem with Facebook is that it's owned by Facebook, and they kind of suck as a company, and everything about their platform is like, hey, connect it to your Facebook account, and then we're going to interrupt you playing Beat Saber or working out last night so that we could tell you to, connect your Horizon account or whatever. And it does all this stuff that just really annoys the crap out of me. So, I think like there's an opening right now that PlayStation could fill, and I would love to see them do it because I think they're the right company to do it. I will say the other thing that scares me about VR, developer interest in developing for the platform, which has declined. It was ramping up for a while, and then there's been a big drop off, and I think it has to do with the fact that there's not really any platforms developers trust, and I think that they're resisting putting their time into it right now and waiting for an opening to exist. And there's been I don't want to get into it, but basically there's a bunch of stuff going on in the industry right now where developers are kind of pulling out of VR and kind of waiting to see what happens. And that makes me sad because I thought it was finally getting somewhere interesting. So,
I put that right at the feet of Sony. I know people come in and be like Xbot or whatever. I don't care. Sony had a product in PSVR1 that, while imperfect, I enjoyed. I had a number of experiences that I liked. And then while they were making the PlayStation 5, they decided that they wouldn't put the proper ports and reads and things like that so that you could play your PlayStation VR1 through a PlayStation 5 if you have a certain setup. And I can't remember the actual specifics of what
you needed a dongle.
The dongles, everything. I missed out on the dongles, whatever it is, that essentially my PSVR1 library went fallow. There's no interest in buying them from me because my PSVR1 helmet sits unhappily not being used. And I said, all right, I'll wait for PlayStation VR2 to come out because surely the hardware that has the number 2 is going to use the library, and it doesn't have to enhance it. It doesn't have to do anything like that, but they'll figure out a way to bring over the many dollars that I have spent on PSVR1 that they killed off early to transition to the next generation of consoles, which they didn't even provide to everybody because of legitimate reasons out in the world. And nope, when PlayStation announces that they won't be supporting the PlayStation VR1 libraries, it's like, developer, what do you want a developer to do? Right? They get cut off on the knees to go in. They get cut off on the knees to the next generation. If I'm a developer, I would say it's stupid to have to put your flag in a platform that these tech companies kind of maybe don't know what they're doing with.
Yeah, I think that a lot of developers see a bubble because they see Meta, which is a company that is poised and famous for blowing up stuff that they acquire, possibly doing that. They see PlayStation kind of showing that they don't really believe in the platform, at least for a couple years there. We weren't really sure what their messaging was. And I think like just look at the companies the developers that went all in on developing games for the Kinect. Like, look at those guys and talk about their horror stories and the fact that a lot of them got their legs cut out from under them, that affected their business. Some of those companies went out of business. I don't think Milo existed, but I'm talking about like Harmonix, like they had Dance Central, which is one of my favorite Kinect games. I'm a bit of a Kinect apologist. I think
Harmonix is part of the Tencent Epic Alliance. They are part of our coming army
now. But yeah, I think there's a lot of developers that were doing amazing stuff. What's that game that it was the last Kinect game to ever come out? It was a platformer that I think IGN gave it like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. It was like an amazing. There's a really good Kinect game that came out at the very end of Kinect's life. I'm gonna look it up because I've played that game multiple times. It's one of my favorite games.
Let's see. I played Disneyland Adventures on Kinect. I played that Han Solo musical game.
Also bad. I think that was the same game actually that you just mentioned.
No,
you're right. It was Kinect Star Wars. It was a separate game.
I've never. I don't know if I played many at all. I
played
mostly.
The game was called Fru. FRU.
FRU.
It was called Fru.
Did not play
it was like a labor of love by a small developer, and they had been working on it for years, and the Kinect had already announced that it wasn't going to be a thing anymore, and they were like, well, let's just finish the game and put it out there. And it came out, and the people who actually played the game were like, dude, this was amazing. Like, like it kind of showed the potential of the Kinect right as the Kinect went away. But if you have, an old Xbox One or Xbox 360 even lying around and you want to play a Kinect game that's amazing, Fru is a fantastic game. Came out in 2016.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So
anyway, my point is there's a parallel there for like a bubble that people put a lot of eggs in, and then exploded and kind of back, it screwed up everything. And so I think there's a lot of developers that legitimately are interested in the tech, but are looking at it and just being like who's the champion of this?
Well,
I
you're
don't
beholden
want
to
it
your
to be
tech
Meta.
masters, right?
Yeah.
Google shows that it doesn't believe in anything for 4 minutes. Sony is doing whatever they're doing. Facebook, I'm getting into bed with Zuck. No. So I'm like, I don't blame developers for that, because essentially you can just depend on a flat screen video game and get it out through normal means, because the Game Passes, the subscription services, the cloud services are still just variants of what we're used to. VR is different. And to answer this question, Dan, do you want to read this one? I know we were already answering it, but
yeah, we got it up. Google Man 81, €5. Is that right? What, from your perspectives, are the main factors still holding VR back besides Meta as either the monopoly or not present, depending on your location? Yes.
I like that. Yeah. No, Meta sucks. I don't know that anybody is just a true Meta fan. Man, Meta, I hear that, and I'm excited. So, Meta, part of what we're going to talk about is like they've put all this money in, right? You've got articles now talking about billions of dollars of burn for a metaverse that they're trying to build, that they think VR is necessary for, which I actually argue on that point there, but that you just don't know. I don't know if Meta is going to be around because they're making such silly decisions, honestly. They're burning through so much money, and they've tried to pivot away from their main product. I don't know that I believe that Meta is a good, well-run business organization. I feel like it's more easily explained as they got first mover advantage with that strong network effect product, and they did well with it. And as they try to move into the land of actually making other things, I don't know that they're the good keepers of this. So I think that's a problem. And in the home,
if Oculus were independent or got acquired by not Facebook, I think we'd live in a different VR universe.
Yeah,
I really do.
The Quest is magic. And I don't know that Facebook knows what to do with it. And the other thing I would add to this entire conversation, I think, Travis, you had 1,000 good points, is that in the home, VR is tremendously isolating, right? For that immersion, you have to go in your bubble. And for the average person living their life, that is, you're spending political capital to play VR in a way that you might not be if you are playing a game on the TV and you're still moderately present in the household conversation. So I think VR is that kind of thing you have to schedule. And you have to say, I'm going to go do this. Almost like you're leaving the house.
I think to translate, if you're playing a video game on a television, you're just the dad on the couch. And if you're playing VR, you're an absentee father. That's what it's like at that point. Because you're somewhere else. You might as well be at the bar. You know what I mean? Like, you can't really. And I think some stuff is like they added transparency to the MetaQuest semi recently, which means that you can see the outlines of things that are in the room. So if other people are trying to talk to you or whatever, they can be there. And so I've had my fiance walk by me and I'm like, hey, what's up? And I'm able to talk to her with the thing on my face, right?
That's I love that cool. Too, because they think they're invisible.
They think they're invisible, and you go and you talk to them, and then they're like, oh, he noticed me. And I think the MetaQuest Pro also has like a more advanced version of that feature where it has full transparency and you can see the world around you. Is kind of so I think there's options there, but that's a huge point. Like the fact that it takes you out of your world and means that you can't really interact with other people unless they're also wearing a headset and joined a game with you separately, which is its own kind of.
Which is still weird because it's still like you went somewhere else to do it. And the only concession I have to it, I do recommend, is you can get the open ear headphones. That is helpful to not being yelled at. This is just my pro tip for people in VR. We do have a super chat from Gecko Gamer.
Yeah, with the €2. I can't believe that Meta tried to hype up legs. I don't know what legs is.
Okay, so in their Horizon, in their main product in the Metaverse, they were little hovering like meeples from a board game, and they added legs, and then they were like, "Look at us go." It's like, yeah, I get it, but you look like Second Life. I don't know what to tell you. I'm glad you're figuring this out, Meta, but come back to us when the thing looks decent.
That's really what they went with, huh?
It is.
Yeah, here's the thing. The biggest thing with VR, and I think you guys said it 1,000. It's the price. It's the price for entry. It's the onboarding people onto this stuff that, when you have gamers anyway, have so much to choose from outside of VR. And to Travis's point, if the developers are kind of being hesitant as far as going for it, then I mean, if you're paying $300 minimum, $400 now, or whatever they raised the price to, just for your base unit, it's just hard, and it's, when I say it's niche, it's not because I think it's a bad tech. I think it's just because people are they're having problems getting people to do it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the biggest thing. And
I think it's a great point. And I think Microsoft is a part of this story as well, because Microsoft is trying to get hardware agnostic. They want you to be able to get Game Pass on that advanced refrigerator that you have, right? So this VR is the exact antithesis of what Microsoft is looking to move into from the consumer side. They don't want you to need anything. You can't see an easy way for them to use Game Pass or subscription services or games that you don't otherwise have to pay for on pieces of hardware that you don't own. So this is a specialized piece of hardware. Microsoft wants to move against that, which means they're investing against that, which means that there's actually a push against VR in a very interesting way. Microsoft continues to cover the sun in its news items. We'll talk about Microsoft a little bit later in this episode. But I think that's an interesting part of when I don't think Microsoft cares one way or the other about VR, but their entire business model depends on you not needing anything, putting it on your TV, putting it on your phone, putting it on wherever. You can't fake VR. You need something that gives you glasses. You need some goggles. And so I think Microsoft will continue to try to downplay VR as useful. And that's a loud voice yelling that from the heavens.
Yeah. I don't know if they're actually downplaying it as useful. I think that they're ignoring it because they learned a very expensive lesson from Kinect. And to their credit, I think it's actually worked out that they just sort of avoided it, because with all the kind of rockiness that's happened, I think if Microsoft were in there with its own headset, it would be kind of, again, it would be noisy as heck, but I don't think that they would have helped the situation. I don't think the champion of the very dead Kinect is the person you want as champion of VR. And so I think they kind of have to sit this one out. They're in a timeout for peripherals. I think that, at this point, that's really what it's about. So I
think it's really, you can't sell Game Pass into it, right? It's not easily sold into it because you need a separate piece. The entirety of their model is you don't need anything. Do you have a PC
on whatever
already?
You want.
Do you have a TV already? Do you have a phone already? We'll figure it out. We'll get you these games. We'll figure it out.
I do think, Hoeg, that if they're being consistent with their argument, if they're playing the infinite game with their kind of, what they believe in, there's you own VR headsets, well, we want you to be able to play on those too argument, and so I think we'll see how much they actually believe in that when they start talking about it, which I assume when the PSVR comes out, and if headsets and VR ends up ramping up again in terms of its development, they'll probably talk about it. But yeah, I would agree they're probably holding the industry back, but I don't think it's out of God, we hope VR doesn't exist or doesn't succeed. I think they're on a timeout. They know that they can't be the champion for it right now because of their track record with peripherals. And I think that is a smart idea and also kind of hilarious to me. So,
all right, we do have a super chat. I think you're exactly right, Ains, that we have to talk a little bit about economics here. So Dan, why don't you read out who it's from and what it says, and then we'll talk about how super chats work for a second.
Yeah. So Porsche Power, our good old buddy Ains with the $10 $9.99 super chat, which is essentially $5. Bitcast exclusively in the Metaverse in 2023. Love you all. Heard Andor was bad, so rewatching Halo on my trip instead. That's terrible.
Now, just so we're clear on this super chat, folks. Ains likes to throw bombs because he knows in the direct messages, one of the few things that Travis and I agree on is that Andor rocks. So he likes to throw these things in, but in so doing, he decides to make a $3 donation to YouTube because this is his channel. He has paid himself, and you can't beat the VIG. So YouTube just takes $3 of this for saying, "Hey, cool beans, man."
Yeah. Maybe he's laundering it.
I messaged, what's the opposite of tax dodging? He's just forcing himself to pay more taxes on income and also a fee to YouTube. It's hilarious.
I love it, Ains. I hope you're having fun. Also, that is a ridiculous statement at the end of this super chat. Andor is maybe the best Star Wars in decades.
It's pretty good. Also, rewatching Halo is not a sentence anybody has ever said. That's not a phrase that exists. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah,
go home, you're
crazy,
drunk.
Man.
Dan.
Gecko Gamer with the €5. I would argue that Kinect was a total failure. The device still sees use in industrial environments as it is a cheap stereo camera.
I
It
think he
was-
might have
was not.
Yeah, I think he
maybe,
meant to
yeah.
say wasn't
Was
a
not.
total
Okay,
failure.
I gotcha.
So yeah, I would say that if your main use for your consumer facing entertainment device is that you're being used in industrial environments as a cheap stereo camera, that you were probably a total failure. That would be my
You know what I really loved on the Kinect? I really loved whatever algorithm it had for kind of zooming in on you and being able to kind of move around during like a whatever the equivalent of FaceTime was that they called it.
It
Like
was,
that was always super impressive.
It was Skype, because Microsoft bought Skype at the time.
Right.
Yep.
That's right. It was their Skype Connect
was Skype.
technology, but it was cool.
Which is hilarious. Skype is now a verb that everyone uses to describe their Zoom calls. I'll Skype you.
Maybe in San Francisco.
No, it's mostly old people. Now we just say Zoom, but yeah. I liked the signing in by raising your hand. That was my favorite feature.
Well,
You'd be on the Xbox dashboard and you'd just be like, "Hey," and then it would sign you in, and then you'd be like, "Okay, cool."
Pause button that was like hold it down and to the side.
The Kinect was so bad. But Dance Central, I have actually replayed Dance Central in the past 18 months. I like rehooked up my Xbox 360.
Man, wouldn't you like to be
Kinect.
a fly on the wall of Travis's life? Like what day
Dude,
you wake up and you say, you know what? Connect Dance Central.
Dude, Dance Central is a great game and it has a good storyline. I will repeat, Dance Central has a good story in it. And if you played the game, you'd know that.
I
Did you
own
play
Dance
this game?
Central. I never
Which one?
played it very much. Okay, that's a weird. Okay, I
Which
don't
one?
think I have
Which
a Connect
game?
in this house.
Which game?
So
Which Dance Central?
Dance Central Connect.
Oh, the first one.
Yeah, is there another one?
There's 3. There's actually 4 Dance Central, 5 Dance Central games. There's 5 Dance Central games. Let me walk you through Dance Centrals. There's Dance Central 1, Dance Central 2, and Dance Central 3, all which released on the original Kinect for the Xbox 360. Then there is Dance Central Spotlight, which released on the Kinect 2.0 that launched with the Xbox One version and was their software as a service Dance Central game. And then, of course, there's Dance Central VR, which released actually somewhat recently on VR headsets and is kind of a dancing game and also a dating sim, kind of weirdly, kind of pivoted in their direction there. But Dance Central 1 was basically a very bare bones but interesting idea for a dancing game. 2 was a great game and it added a story that's actually surprisingly good. And then 3 is a time travel based game where you're going back in time to like save all the dance eras from being annihilated by the bad guy. And it's actually an amazing game if you haven't played it. So Dance Central 2 and 3, goated. You should play them if you have a 360
have a
Kinect lying
house.
around.
Yeah.
And my Kinect that I bought with the one when they were mandated broke down, died.
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
It completely busted. And
Whoa.
I cared so little about it, I didn't even seek a refund or recompense.
Wow.
Completely broke.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people you convinced to go pick up Dance Central, but I'm guessing it's like 2.
Well,
Like,
if I can convince even one soul to treat
There you go.
themselves to one of the greatest
One
immersive
person.
games,
That's it.
it's
That's what matters.
worth it. It's
Yep.
worth it.
All right.
Good
So
job,
the other
guys.
aspect of this, we talked about it. Let's just hit it real quick. One of the things I tweeted when this happened for the Quest Pro was, well, Sony appreciates you doing a big favor for them because their price is going to look more reasonable, whatever it is, with $1,500 otherwise out there. We've been told by Sony they're going to launch this thing early next year. That's what they're aimed at least. What do you think the price point of this bad boy looks like?
I'm just gonna throw this out there. I'm gonna say $650.
You think it's going to be more than the base PlayStation 5?
Yes.
I think it will be also. I think it's going to be $599.
Okay, I
Pretty
will say at
close.
either of those answers, it's dead on arrival.
I don't think so, actually. I think $599 would be the best price it could come at, because my problem with it being $499 is that I don't think the headset would be particularly good, especially for a wired headset. And the fact that the PlayStation 5 is not as powerful as a high-end PC that would have to run a $1,000 headset. I think if they go $1,000 and are trying to compete with the Vive and the Steam Index, the Valve Index, they're going to be dead on arrival because they're competing with a market that is for people who want to buy or already have a high-end PC and are just throwing VR on top of that, which is a very different market. I think if they manage to fill that middle pocket of people who want VR, but they don't want a cheap toy like a wireless headset, and they want to use the existing power they have from their console, I think that'll be awesome. I think it really will be. I mean, maybe there's people who know more than me, and there's a reason there's not that middle tier headset that's priced in the middle. But I honestly think that that's what the industry's been missing. And I think if the experiences are right for that, PlayStation has been investing in VR. They have several VR studios. They've even acquired more recently. I think it could be huge. So,
but doesn't it kind of become not a middle tier headset price when you have to add in a PS5 too? So now you're already up.
I don't think that's fair when I see that online, because you got your PlayStation 5 for a different reason.
Right. Yeah, 100%. But if that logic, trying to get into VR, that's probably not the route you're going to go.
Well, the logic there then, Dan, is that if people have that opinion, then they should be consistent about that opinion for all the PC headsets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But the Vive costs $4,000 or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And even if you own a MetaQuest 2, if you want to play high-end games, you have to connect it to your gaming PC, which costs $2,000 at least. So I would say that's not really a consistent argument. And I think it's way easier to just buy a PS5 than it is to acquire a high-end PC if you don't have one already. So I think the idea is...
No, that's true.
Well, I'm going to put my stake in the ground on this.
Okay.
And it's $399. It's $400 for the PS VR2. I do not see them going above it.
Ooh.
Why?
Why? Because they want to sell units. You're entering into an apocalypse of an economy already. You've got to put these things into PlayStation 5s that you've struggled to get into people's homes already. And I think if you want to have that kind of market penetration that Sony at least is projecting as it wants, then 600 is just, you're never going to get that. I know that Travis is like $1,500. I can put that together. The rest of America is not.
No.
So we're looking at dollar bills differently, I think, which is fine. That's the nature of always arguing about these prices, right? In terms of, so that's too much for $70. Things like The Last of Us is that money is subjective, and you can never kind of argue that point across people, but you can argue it in the aggregate across markets. And if you're looking at Sony and they want to have a market for this thing, $600, I think, kills it in its crib.
I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying, seeing how they operate, I would. No way it launches for under probably 5, maybe 6.
All right, clip this out, people. Put this in the chat, because they're going to have a number of some kind. My bet is $399.
My vote is not about economics, because I don't think Sony cares about economics too much, and I think the recent history shows that
shows in their economic, management.
Correct. And I also don't think that it's because they're a shitty company. I don't have Dan's reason, and I don't have your reason, Hoeg. My reason that I think it'll be $599 is because I've looked at the tech, and it's very ambitious, and I don't think they could do it for $399. So I think it'll probably be, if they do $499, that would be amazing.
At the engineering phase. I mean, I don't know that they didn't. Right. I think the tethered is a mistake. I think the killing of the library is a mistake. I think that if you couldn't figure out your engineering problems to make sure that you could bring over that library, then you've made a mistake at the design level. So if you tell me that they designed so much that they can't sell it for less than 6, I'm not going to necessarily disagree with you, but then the mistakes were made years ago.
Sure. And you can think that for sure. I think people who are playing VR are probably at this point still early adopters. I know that's kind of ridiculous because there's millions of people out there with headsets, but it's still not exactly the most mainstream, at least the high end. And I think that this is $599 would be an opportunity for people who, I've already got a PS5. I'm interested in VR. The MetaQuest is probably not my bag. I want to have more high-end experience. And if the software is there, I think $599 is an attractive price point. It's not if they don't have any software. And to your point, we're losing the PSVR 1 catalog, which is not a great place to start off. We don't know,
if not thousands of VR games.
Correct. We don't know any any killer apps that exist for the PSVR 2. And what we've seen of, there's going to be God of War and there's going to be Horizon in VR are not particularly exciting for me. Yeah, exactly. So I think their biggest problem will be that if they sell a $599 headset, the price won't kill them. The lack of stuff to do on the headset will. And I don't know that they're prepared for that.
That's kind of the point, right? Like, historically, these companies sell their hardware, not necessarily a loss, but not at a huge profit. So I don't really know how it works with VR. So I don't know. Maybe Travis, is it the kind of the same thought process where we just want to get these units into people's hands so that we can sell them the software? But if the software doesn't exist,
Yeah.
this isn't an Xbox or a PlayStation. You have at least some kind of backward compatibility. You have, that these games are going to come for these systems.
Yeah.
With VR, you're kind of like, maybe, possibly,
Yeah.
hopefully.
I think some of these headsets are being sold at cost, certainly probably at the worst case scenario. I don't think they're taking terrible losses on these headsets though, because they are mostly pretty expensive. And I don't know how the Meta Quest works. The Meta Quest 2 is just like a magical device. But I would expect that probably Sony's not going to be taking losses on the PSVR 2. And I think that they will need significant software reasons to get people to buy it. And I think honestly, just because my experience with headsets and how astronomically expensive they are, $599 is not. I mean, I don't really blink at that. But I also live in San Francisco. We play with Monopoly money. Our salaries are 3 times what normal people's salaries are, and so are our rents. And bubblegum costs $4 a pack. Maybe I'm living in a bubble on this one.
I just think you're comparing the wrong market for what Sony wants to get in. It's not headsets, it's the market. It's PlayStation players, it's gamers, is kind of a more broad base. To me, you might be exactly right, Travis. I would say that Sony's then very wrong. But if it's $600, I think it dies because of all the things that you said, right? You can't get the software and you can't get the developers in if the base isn't there. And it just kind of spirals into death. And they say, we tried. And then it goes into the long line of a graveyard of technological devices. To me, if Sony wants to get success in VR, they're going to maybe have to eat a bit of a loss if that's what they engineered in order to go and get the base that supports the thing and then work from the market with that. I mean, that's how this stuff works. Is Sony going to do that? I don't know. But I do think that the American people, if they look at a $600 VR headset, it's not going to sell 1 million, let alone the 3 that they're aimed at.
I guess we'll see.
It's just an opinion thing. And again, and not only is it just an opinion thing, it's like you also have to take into account how stupid is Sony. Did Sony over-engineer it and is willing to sell it at a massive loss that could also cripple their company? Do they only sell it at the number that's not going to build the base? Or do you find some happy medium where there's just people with $600 extra that say, yes, sir? I don't know. So that's VR. Does anybody else have anything to add before we get into some of the kind of smaller topics in the world of video gaming entertainment?
I just want to reiterate that everybody. What was that?
That was something outside.
It was a ghost.
He's getting attacked by an elephant.
No, that's what it sounded. I think it was a car.
Yeah. I just want to reiterate, everybody should play Dance Central 2 and 3 and Fru on the Kinect. Those are my recommendations. That's it.
If you could find the tech to do it.
If you find the tech, play Dance Central 2 and 3 on the 360 and Fru on the Xbox One Kinect. That's
niche entrepreneurial opportunity. Bank
there you go.
Licensed with Microsoft for commercial sales.
It just makes me so sad, Hoeg, because I know you agree with me on this one that game preservation is like is we're in a tough spot as an industry and stuff like that, where it's just like, dude, there was legitimately a great Kinect game that nobody can play.
Especially with the failed hardware. Like you always get into those things, right? Like I joke about it, but like I loved Burning Rangers on the Saturn. Who even knows what in the world that is? And that's a normal game console. So you start to get into kind of weirder and weirder stuff. Nobody will ever have an experience like Steel Battalion on the Xbox.
Dude, I mean, like, that game was
weird, but it was sweet, right? Novelty, variety, excitement. But like, I still have my 4-panel joystick.
You do?
Yeah, it's in my basement.
Are you serious? You have Steel Battalion?
Yeah, I have Steel Battalion. Why is that a surprise?
That's amazing. I mean, I was a kid when that came out, so obviously I was poor as heck. So my ability to access that was based on my brother in the military who had their squad or whatever had access to one. So I got to play that, but yeah, there were so many things I wanted back in that era that I couldn't have, and that was one of them. So
it's the same for me. I was a little older than you, but there was at the GameStop, they had an upper shelf where they kind of kept big statues and things. And there was a Steel Battalion in a box there that sat there for 2 years. When I first got my first like summer lawyer job, and I had a little funning around money. I said, you know what, we're gonna go and we're gonna pick that up. And so I have a Steel Battalion. But I mean, like that was cool. That was cool.
So what you're saying is you were a young lawyer when I was in middle school?
We'd have to do the math on it, but I think maybe not a young lawyer. It would have been before I passed the bar. So they do summer associateships. But yes, it was my first year as a summer associate, and it was like, yes, celebratory. Let's spend. I think at that point it was 150. Let's spend that and enjoy. And it was fun.
2004, Captain Logan says so. But you said it was on the shelf for 2 years. So
it might not have been to you. It might have just felt like that to a younger Hoeg.
Okay. 2004, I was in middle school.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was definitely, I definitely got it there, and it might have been my first actual paycheck. So it could have been 2005. So memories, misty watercolored memories. It's in that era. I definitely got a check. And I definitely said, let's spend $150 on it, on this really stupid piece of plastic. That definitely happened.
Amazing. Does it has like my memory of that is like almost mystical, because I just remember playing it like once or twice and being like, oh my God, this is what I could do if I had money. And then the capitalism swelled in my mind and brain. And I was like, someday.
That's how I felt about those triangular juice pops back when I was a kid. That was what the rich kids had. So it was like someday, really. See?
So my memory of it was that there's a button under glass that you use when you're ejecting. You have to flip a glass thing.
It's a plastic, but yes.
Plastic? That's amazing.
It's a transparent box.
I'm so jealous. So jealous you got to have money during that era, because
I'll see if I can find it. I can box it up for you. Doesn't IGN have a copy of Steel Battalion?
I think we do. Yeah, there's a room at the IGN office called the library, and it's basically just like a closet where you enter it, and it's just like, it's not a closet. It is like a huge just shelves of just games and hardware and stuff, and you're just like, oh, first time you go in it, it's like the mecca of game stuff. But yeah. I've never looked for it.
This right here from Christy.
Triangular juice pops. You guys are old, man. I don't know what the heck that is.
We're seasoned. Yeah, they were the
Capri Sun. Are you referring to Capri Sun?
They're the ones that were actually marketed as juice, if I can remember correctly. And they look like you squeeze them from the bottom, and they have like a circular top. Kind of.
This is what the rich kids had.
Yeah.
What the heck are you guys talking about?
I was rich.
Man, all right. We're coming on in here.
I didn't even have access to food where I grew up, so this is news to me. People were eating triangles of juice
stuff.
Yeah, have access to food.
I was eating out of dumpsters. I was a raccoon child.
They're these kinds of things.
Yep. I have never seen that in my life. I do not. That is crazy.
You couldn't afford these. We all had the ones like with the little clown on them that are like this the ribbons of straight pops that are like juices
freeze
never
pops.
touched. Yeah, freeze pops. There you go.
Yep.
No, you don't. Triangular juice pops. I guess maybe they're always Minute Maid. I don't know.
I always remember them being like some kind of real.
I don't remember either of the juice-based pops you guys are talking about. I didn't know this was a problem that we had in the world.
You don't know freeze pops?
I don't know what a freeze pop
is. Where have you lived, man?
Oh my gosh!
I grew up in Oakland.
No, freeze pops.
I was extremely poor, so I didn't. Yeah, ice cream wasn't. I think I tasted ice cream for the first time when I was like 19.
Get the hell out of here!
Flavor ice popsicle variety. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
this is good. We're discovering things about each other's seasoning.
Yeah, my back just started hurting really bad for some reason.
There you go.
Isn't that the way?
Yeah, I think it's the weather. Yeah, they want my knee.
Well, in any event, the point was the rich kids had the fancy triangle pops. I actually remember some in kind of like black packaging as the ones that were the really expensive ones. So maybe I'll find those for you, Travis. But otherwise, okay.
We're all gonna share a triangle juice pop together. That's what we're gonna have.
We're gonna play Steel Battalion. What are the other things the rich kids had? We're gonna play Steel Battalion. We're gonna get the fancy bagel bites in the oven. We're gonna hang out. It's gonna be great. Actually, it sounds great. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it does sound great. I just bought a bunch of bagel bites, not joking, yesterday.
See?
At Costco.
Fancy.
Awesome.
All right, so we've done our piece with virtual. I almost said legality, but virtual reality. Let's talk a bit about the controversies of the day. So very first, top of line here is that if you thought we were over the 30 frames per second era, we are not, as brought to us by the fine folks at Warner Brothers Games, who announced that if folks had expected there to be a performance mode, what we usually use as coding for 60 frames per second, at least in video games for the upcoming title Gotham Knights, we are mistaken. That this game does not have a 60 frames per second option. It only has 30 frames per second. And there was also some language in their note, and you guys can correct me on this if I get this mistaken. There was some language in this note that said it wasn't quite a causation type statement, but we still have good stuff like untethered co-op across the entire city, which by proximity, I think is meant to read, this is why you get that good stuff, is you got the co-op because we had to sacrifice frames. But you don't get the frames back for solo mode, at least as best I can tell from the statements that they made. So I guess the question I have, so Travis, I know you can't talk specifically about Gotham Knights or how this is implemented, but maybe you could talk about 30 versus 60 and how you feel about that in general and maybe cooperative gameplay. Dan, I don't know were you going to get Gotham Knights before this announcement?
No.
All right.
This was a kind of a hard pass.
Did you like the Arkham games?
I did like the Arkham games.
Why wouldn't you play this then? Because you can play it single player.
I mean,
I'm more of a Batman fan than anything else.
Oh, it's the characters.
Yeah.
It's specifically Batman.
Yeah, it's really just Batman. He's really the only person in DC that I actually care about. And I don't really care about him that much.
I think it's like everybody but Batman. It's like every other character.
Yes. It's everyone that I don't care about. It's I wasn't gonna get this. I mean, I think Suicide Squad might be a little bit more interesting to me.
Okay.
Just based on the characters alone.
Okay.
But the problem I have with this, I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, I feel like we're at a point now that at least an option for performance mode would be nice. I don't know anything about game dev though, so I'm speaking, out my butt here. But I remember back when like the Xbox One came out, right, and it was always now you can play your games at 4K and this and this and this, and it struggled to reach that point sometimes with games, and it was and then the next version of it or whatever it was, because it was I can't even remember, there were so many. It was supposed to be the 1X, right? Was supposed to be like this next level, and I feel like it really wasn't. I mean, it really wasn't. And when I see this, it starts taking me back to those times, and I don't like it, because when I first got the Xbox Series X, I was reviewing Valhalla at the time, and I'd already started playing it on the 1X, and when I put it in on the Series X to continue, I mean, it was like night and day difference.
That's a big difference.
Like, oh my gosh. I mean, I don't have a PC that I play really constantly, so I've never really even seen like 60 FPS or what it could be, and in that vein, of entertainment, I just never seen it. So I was just like, this is crazy. So now that's like a benchmark for me. I mean, I'm not going to play anything lower than 60. There's no reason to for me.
It's basically standardized right now. I mean, I can't think of the last one that I had to play at 30.
That's the thing, right?
Right now, you usually say, okay, you want to turn on ray tracing or you want to be a little fancier with the resolution, you can go down to 30. But I can't think of the last big budget release that didn't at least have the option.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Big budget release.
Right.
Yeah, major release. Yeah, the game developers can do all sorts of stuff. There's probably indie games that play at 12 frames per second, but like of the ones that get the kind of mass advertising, the things that hit the top line, the ones that have IGN first looks. I don't know. I can't imagine the last time that you didn't at least have an option to have a 60 frames per second. So to some extent, that's the market shifted around them. Like I think this game was being made for a long time. Certainly, it had a couple of delays in there, but it wouldn't surprise me if, regardless of how it reviews, there are at least a couple of people out in the audience that say, nope. I know my brother, for instance, is just like, no, 60 or bust. Like, I just won't play it.
The way. I mean, that's what we were sold, though, right? That was the whole point of, getting this upgrade and paying the extra, the $500 to get the new console because of the power. You know,
It's always a
and
spectrum, though, right?
Well,
it's always like
in this
bells,
case,
whistles,
Dan,
resolution. Yeah.
in this case, Dan, the reason you bought the new consoles is so you could play the game, because the game is not available on previous gen consoles.
which
After it was
again,
announced
doesn't
for
make
them.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
So yeah, you can't play it on the previous gen. And I think some people, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think some people thought when they ditched the old gen that was to make it so that you could meet the other qualifications that the current big budget games are doing, which is, I think 60 is an expectation at this point. And I'm happy for it to be. But I do think it's always a spectrum. Like the fight was always not, do these boxes have more power? They do. It's that, are the developers going to crank up whatever random things they're doing, or have tech that the physics prohibits 60 or whatever it is that they're setting up? That was always a choice, right? You heard this from really old school, like Insomniac, when Ratchet and Clank was 60 very early on, and they thought that was important for their action game. And it wound up looking a little bit more flatly shaded than their competitors at the time, is that they thought that was important. And so they make it 60. It was always a choice because it presents slightly worse screenshots than you can get with maximum bells and whistles on 30. But I think over this generational transition, people have gotten used to it. Valhalla is a great example, Dan, because that's one of the ones that I remember transitioning to as well, which is like, oh, well, that's a vastly different feeling and looking game with 60. But Travis, is 60 separate from this specific game? Is 60 important to you? Is it a drop dead? You don't seem to have a lot of drop deads, honestly.
I don't have a lot of drop deads, and I actually think 60 FPS is probably one of the least important metrics for measuring a game. Think about all your favorite games.
Okay, I'm thinking about all my favorite games.
They don't have 60 frames per second. None of them.
I know that's because CD Projekt Red keeps delaying my Witcher 3 update.
Yeah, I mean, all of the games on your top 10 list, and probably I would argue most people's top 10 list, are not in 60 FPS. And so I think if you're looking at a game's qualitative, kind of value, 60 FPS has basically no bearing on whether the game is good or bad. And so I think that people who say like, oh, my eyeballs can't handle it, it's like, go drink some water, dude. Like that's like your eyeballs should,
water for my eyes.
Yeah, your eyeballs should be able to handle that. I don't know what's wrong with your body. But that said, some games don't perform well and don't look good and don't play well if they're in 30 FPS. So it really just differs from game to game, right?
Action games, yeah.
Action games. If you're playing a shooter in 2022 and you have certain standards for the frame rate and you're going for accuracy and twitch shooting, then sure, 60 FPS absolutely matters. So it sort of just differs from game to game. I will say, in this day and age, a game like Gotham Knights probably should play 60. I think that's probably what the market will expect, but I do not think it really has any bearing on the game necessarily. It just will depend on, does the game feel sluggish, right? Does the game feel like it hitches up a lot because the 30 FPS sometimes drops down to 15 FPS and you kind of lose track of the movement, or is it locked into 30 and feels smooth? Different. I mean, there's a million examples I can point to of 30 FPS games that are great and that they play well and the frame rate is not a problem. And so I think it matters more to players in their mind than it does actually when they're playing the game. I think people shrink at the idea of playing a 30 FPS game, but if they didn't know it wasn't 60, they probably wouldn't be bothered by it. So I don't know.
Well, I know this is going to come as a surprise to you, Travis, but I'm going to disagree entirely.
I know you are.
What? Well, to me, I actually think the 60 leap is the biggest one. I would ditch resolution. I would ditch ray tracing. I would ditch flashy lights, because I do think, you say, does it feel sluggish? And yeah, I think that there are developers that are really top of their craft that can do things with motion blurs and like anticipatory button presses and things like that can make it feel okay. But on the whole, you compare the 30 frames per second to the 60 frames per second version, or let's say you say people don't notice it. I feel like I notice it. 60 feels better. 60 looks better. You immediately notice that it feels classier to me. Like it feels like it's more put together. Generally, the world feels more, it feels less like it's going to fall apart than 30. And that's not every developer. Naughty Dog lived in 30.
That's my point. If it's not universally true, it has no value when you're judging games. Like,
I don't think so, because I think you could still baseline it. I think you can still say, as a general rule, 60 is going to feel better than 30. And so I'm going to start to only limit my kind of initial reactions to 60 until I start getting signal flares from everybody that this 30 feels okay.
Yeah, I think that's fine, and that's totally within your ability to do it. But I think that if you're evaluating a game and its goodness, its ability to run 60 FPS is irrelevant if it plays well and feels well on 30. And so I think that while people can obviously use it to guide their decisions, it's not the rule that makes a game good or not.
Okay.
And so
I don't think the rule.
I will say this. For a game like Gotham Knights, a AAA game on current gen consoles
and with no support of the back gen,
no support of the back gen, that is probably has a small open world that probably should be able to handle 60 FPS. It not being 60 FPS is a bad look, and it probably will feel less good than 30. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that if you're doing what I do for a living, which is trying to look at a game and determine its goodness, how much joy it brings you versus pain. I think coming up with hard rules like that and being like, oh well, it's not 60, so it's clearly it loses a point just for that. Like that's just an insane way to view the world. I think.
I'm talking to you about reviews for just a second. Like games are weird, right? Because games have an artistic story, action quality to them. They also have a tech quality. Like, do you value those differently? Do you try to discount tech when you're evaluating a game as a game? Do you go from like a platonic ideal? What is your thought process there?
Tech matters in a review if it is impacting your enjoyment of the game. And it certainly can with certain games. Like if you're playing a game and you're like, God, this really is chugging, like it needed a 60 FPS performance mode, then I'll comment on it. But for the vast majority of the games, the tech, if it's a good game, the tech is built to design the game, and the frame rate doesn't really matter. It only serves its purpose in supporting whatever experience the game's trying to give you. And so, I'll comment on tech if it impacts the performance either in a positive way or a negative way. And that sort of thing. So
these are the things I wonder in the back of my head, right? Because it's
So
I
for
like this game, but its camera is junk, and it's like, what do I do with that?
I just want to say, like, I know we're talking about Gotham Knights, which is a game
we're not. You're not talking about Gotham Knights.
I'm currently playing, and I cannot talk about what I think the frame rate does on Gotham Knights.
You're not talking about Gotham Knights, Travis. We understood this loud.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about frame rate in general and my kind of opinions on it and that sort of thing. But I get why people are raising their eyebrows and are upset and surprised by this. I still think that if you're going to be upset and surprised by something about Gotham Knights, I would be way more upset and surprised about the fact that it's a character with 4 playable characters and it's a 2-player game. It's a 2-player game, which blows my mind.
It does seem like the marketing should highlight that more. Right?
I can't believe. I feel like most of the market does not know it's a 2-player game. They think it's a 4-player co-op.
Like their main image is the 4 of them on the street, right? Like maybe
two
and 2. I don't know.
All of their messaging makes it look like it's a 4-player game, and it's not. And I don't think anybody is prepared for that. And so I'm just really like, that is the thing I would be worried about way more than what the frames run at. So
they did announce something with the frame rate, right? They're gonna have like what sounded like a challenge mode that's going to have support 4 players or something
November 29th, which is over a month after the game comes out. They're coming out with a secondary mode that's 4-player, but it sounds like it's maybe just like a combat, like horde mode type. I don't really know what it is.
No, neither did I. And they keep saying it's a free mode, and I couldn't decide whether it's a free add-on to players that bought Gotham Knights or whether they tried to make a free-to-play monetized thing that goes with Gotham Knights.
It looks like it is free to people who bought the game, because I think you can see it in the menu. You can see like the mode, but it's great.
All right, I'm not going to ask you to talk about any other shit you've seen in Gotham Knights.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not allowed to, but I will just say that like it is already public information that the game is a 2-player only game.
Yes, it is.
And I feel like people don't know that, and that's way more.
I didn't know that until just like literally right now.
Today I learned.
I thought it was a 4-player co-op game.
It's not a 4-player co-op game. It is a 2-player co-op game that has 4 playable characters, and you can switch between them. And so I just feel like
Gotham Knights, but you can never have all 4 of them out there.
Yeah, they're the Gotham Knights, and the's always at least 2 of them just going in the background, going, radioing in to be like, hey, what's up? How you guys doing out there? It's like, why aren't they all fighting crime? I don't understand. So
what can you do?
Yeah. That's
Wow.
so yeah. To me, like the tech, unless it's really egregious, is always like, the least important thing to me. So
I'm going to get you heck out of the danger zone, Travis, because we got other topics to talk about. One of them is, and I'd really be interested in what your guys' impressions of this are. One of them is that the CMA once again went out with like a Twitter package about the many potential issues they think they could see with respect to Microsoft's pending acquisition of Activision. And I know you guys are stuck with me every week, but certainly this was picked up by a lot of folks as the CMA making certain pronouncements, which I think are a little bit unwarranted, without me saying anything right this second. Did you guys see this news? And what are your overall kind of impressions of that news and thoughts on that news without me speaking first?
I'm gonna let Travis go on this one.
No, Dan, go.
I literally, I don't even know what the hell you're talking about.
Okay,
I've blacked out
fair answer.
Acquisition stuff. It's literally muted on Twitter for me now. I can't even deal with it because there's so much garbage.
Dan, I totally accept. I have no idea as an answer. Travis, did you see this at all?
Yes, I did. So this is the kind of, I don't want to describe them as activist, but they kind of are.
They're activists. They are active, right? They're not a dormant regulatory body. They are getting out.
A regulatory body that put out some tweets that seemed like they were kind of setting up a maybe scathing kind of interpretation of Microsoft acquiring Activision, which they are a regulatory body, so I assume it is their job, their role in the world to position themselves against large companies getting acquired by other large companies. That's totally within their rights. I'll just say my initial reaction to those tweets were that I didn't think that they carried a lot of legal merit, which I think is what we're talking about, right? Like you're maybe they're. It seemed like a little bit of posturing for like this is bad in general rather than this is legally not going to be able to happen. And to me, like if you're trying to actually draw, information out of those tweets of like, oh, is this going to mean that it doesn't go through at all? I'm not sure that it helps you that, except for to confirm what I think we already knew, which is the general appetite for this sort of thing among regulatory committees, which is that they're not very happy about what's happening in the tech world, which is not particularly surprising. So that was just my initial interpretation of those tweets, and I kind of just read it as, oh, it's more noise. It's it's noise from the people that we would expect to make the exact type of noise, and so we'll just kind of continuing on.
Okay,
I'm just going to assume they said something to the effect of, we're looking at this.
It was just a bunch of tweets that were basically like, here's one factor of a thing that we think will happen, and here's another factor of a thing we think will happen, and they're all very much like negative toward the acquisition.
Well, what's historically where they, have they?
They're always like that, and so that's why it's not surprising. Yeah, I actually think that they had a something that where they came out against it and then it was overturned in court recently or something like that. Hoeg, you would know something more like
they have blocked stuff before.
They tried to block stuff and then it didn't work for them. Gotcha. So
we can go over some of the legal niceties here, but one of them is that every time we talk about a regulatory body, we're talking about whatever that country's equivalent of the executive branch is. And those can still be looked at by whatever the equivalent in that country's judicial branch is. And so the CMA has had instances where whatever, I can't remember the name of their British tribunal, is saying, no, that's not what the statute says. You're reading it wrong, and we can walk it back. That happens to the FTC. That happens to the CMA. That happens to the European Commission even. But yeah, I think what happens is, and this is where I kind of smacked him on the nose a little bit on social media. One, the report that they put out in September is the same as this one, right? And for whatever reason, they double dipped at the well, and a lot of, I'm not even going to call them games journalists, games covering folks, took another sip at that well. Right. They said, oh, okay. And the other thing that they are doing is that they are framing their findings in what is a phase 1 review, which is they this could happen, so we need to look at it further. Like, that's the kind of determination you make at this level. They are reporting them themselves. This isn't really the fault of journalists or anybody else. They're reporting them themselves as findings of like this problem is going to happen kind of sentences. And that's not even what their actual report says. So you go onto social media and you lose some of that nuance, and people of the variety that I think we're all aware of that are one side or the other of this very important plastic box fight.
Radicalized YouTubers.
Radicalized, right? No, I'm radicalized. These guys are something else. Are looking at this and saying, oh, they found X. And it's like, no, not even. They can't. That's not, the statute doesn't give them the authority to find that right now. They're going into what's called a phase 2. Microsoft responded to it, says they don't even think a phase 2 should be required. Microsoft is wrong. Basically, everybody is wrong on every statement they're making here. You can go into virtual legality and just watch the series of videos that I make where I say this is really stupid stuff from everybody. But I think one of the reasons they did it was, one, to get the press coverage that they noted they got in September. 2 is that Brazil had just come out and said the deal is fine. So the CMA wanted to go out there and say it's not fine, and for these reasons. And they said it too strongly, I think. So if you go and you look at my Twitter at Hoeg Law, you can go find me saying basically, we look forward to your phase 2. Shut up. Like this isn't helpful. I think Travis had the perfect word, which is posturing. It's like you're out there saying, well, look how much we're defending the people and whatnot. And I'm not even sure your phase 2 is going to hold water. Certainly Microsoft appears to be simultaneously prepping for a legal avenue if they need one. And so that's interesting. But I was just curious because so many people, and maybe this is a nature of like my position and what I talk about and what people know about me. I got so many messages of so many really large audience people saying like they found this and this specific thing is this. So I had to do a number of tweets that is like, no. They're being political. They're being ridiculous. Let them do whatever, but ignore all of this. So you guys were already ahead of the game, and I'm happy to hear it, which is Dan saying, nah, it's noise. And you, Travis, saying this is what antitrust regulators do. Like, you're exactly where you need to be on this stuff. But I know that a lot of people aren't.
What helps with that? Watching virtual legality. And,
oh, really?
Very nice.
I'm not even joking. I literally watched the Microsoft Said What video.
Yeah,
and it was fantastic. So
I
was
appreciate
like,
it.
all right, good. I can.
Well, as somebody who, unfortunately,
about it.
I'm sorry, I apologize in advance, who has not been following your tweets or your YouTube coverage on this, I will say that was my impression, but I'm also an industry insider, so I would totally expect the average like consumer of Twitter feeds to see those tweets and just be confused by like, okay, so does that mean it's blocked or it's like getting closer to get blocked? But I know politicians well, and I just see that and I'm like, all right, that's just them going like, look, we're doing our job. Isn't it great?
We're doing stuff.
The people. Yeah.
Yep. We're doing stuff. We're doing stuff tweets. You're exactly right, Travis. And the other aspect of it is that people ask me, well, can Britain block it? Because one of the things that's happening is this particularly large forum that I like, and an author that I like, Christopher Dring at Games Industry Biz, keeps going out with the notion that Britain can block it. And so I keep having to answer this question. And it's like, okay, so what I believe Mr. Dring is saying, and honestly, tweet me if you're watching this, Mr. Dring, is that practically speaking, Britain is like the 6th or 7th largest gaming market in the world. Microsoft isn't going to want to do this without figuring out a way to allay British concerns. Right. And there are many different levels of concessions and structures and things that you can do that you can maybe get Britain to the table if they come out of the phase 2 and they decide that they don't want to do it. The legalities here are if that Britain is the only country on earth that says no to this deal, then no, they don't block the deal. Activision is owned by Microsoft, but Microsoft may not be allowed to sell into that market. And then Microsoft can sell into it anyway and accept the penalties and see, if they take those to their courts. Microsoft can say we're pulling Windows from Britain. I mean, like, all hell breaks loose if one jurisdiction tries to stop it, and basically everybody else is on board. That's why you don't see that happen. But people ask me this question. They say, well, why, Disney bought Fox and then they put all their Fox stuff on Disney Plus. Why does this stuff happen and nobody cares about it? And then people they have short memories, or they're not following this stuff. And God knows I don't blame them for that. The Disney Fox deal, as an example, got blocked. It was blocked. When we talk about blocking things, it got blocked, and they asked Disney for concessions, and Disney gave those concessions. They spun off some of the Fox assets. They made certain deals, and that is what
they got rid of pieces of Fox, right?
They did. They spun them off. That's what they spun them off independently, and so when I say that I think this deal is going to go through 70-30, that includes with concessions that I have kind of framed as Microsoft's probably okay with these, give or take, right? Microsoft's clearly okay with X amount of years of Call of Duty being mandated on Sony because they offered that. So if, the CMA were to say that's what we need to get, that's the kind of thing that Microsoft says, okay, that's within our swim lanes. That's why you see them going out in public and making these certain statements, is they are projecting to everyone what they are okay with being asked for. And then if the CMA wants to say, okay, we'll take what Microsoft offers, basically, then that all works out. If they don't, then you go court system, then you go real crazy stuff. But no, Britain can't go and say this American company can't buy this American company on the whole. That what they can do is they can control the transactions within their jurisdiction, and that can be just as bad. If you imagine that the US was the only country in the world that said no, well, Microsoft's going to figure that out.
Yeah, Microsoft. If that happened, Microsoft would probably back down the deal.
Well, they'd figure it out.
It was their market. Yeah,
they would figure it out. I actually think they'd sue the FTC over it.
Probably, and they'd win.
Because I think the FTC has a very weak case on this. I can't speak to the British statutory precedents as well as I can the American ones. Britain usually follows along with America on this kind of question. But we have to be honest about my experience. I can't speak to that as much. The FTC is cruising for a lawsuit if they try to block it and just don't concede on what would be a kind of normal consent decree. And so I think Microsoft is ready for that if they have to, because this is a big deal. This is an important deal in their future. But I don't think it will come to that. I think what we're looking at is the CMA rattling its saber. I would expect the European Commission to rattle it a little bit as well. I think the Federal Trade Commission will also get in basically the same kind of rattling position. And for all jurisdictions, Microsoft will look at trying to figure out a consent decree or an agreement that works for everybody at the most narrow way that they can negotiate it successfully to operate in all jurisdictions. That isn't sexy, right? What I just said, that's not an outrage title. There's no crazy faces. There's nothing like that when we talk about these things. So I do think that social media and some reporting on it is clickbaiting. So that's as Ains frames that section. That is as the acquisition turns.
Yes.
He likes to think of it as a soap opera. I think maybe as our last subject. I guess we can do this. Quick.
We got a quick super chat from Gecko Gamer.
Chats.
Yeah, €5. There it is. Every time I see something about Britain, I just assume the government is still screwing itself in every way possible. All right. Yeah.
Sounds like a Brit.
Sounds like somebody's.
We all have feelings on our own governments, don't we?
That's right.
So before we get into the kind of Bayonetta thing, which I imagine you all have thoughts on, the one thing that I wanted to ask is, did you see the Dead Space remake kind of long form playthrough demo?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
As someone that is sensitive in my concerns about remaking games from different studios, what did you all think about it?
This is gonna make me not play it because I was really hoping for just a straight across just graphical upgrade. This is one. I don't play horror games, number one, but I played this and it's one of my favorite games.
Okay.
It's definitely my favorite horror game. And I didn't like like it sounds like they're adding in stuff that my poor fat heart can't take, and that I feel like I'm going to basically I can't deal with jump scares to a certain extent, and I can't deal with it, man. So the stuff that they're adding in, I don't know if it's going to be. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's just like I can't deal with it. That's I was just kind of hoping like, I get to I like the fully voiced Isaac.
It is fully voiced now, right? It's fully voiced. They showed off zero G sequences.
The zero G stuff looks pretty
continuous
cool.
Loading, whatever story expanded means.
Yeah, the those little moments.
We're gonna have three opinions here, Hoeg.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm on the fence. It looks amazing. It looks really, really good. It's one of my favorite games. So
okay.
Damn.
No, that's awesome. And now Travis, hit us with the positive spin.
Yeah, the positive spin is, okay, so I'll state my opinions on remakes. One is I don't particularly like remakes, but not for the reason most people don't like them. Okay. I don't like remakes because they seem like a waste of creative capital. I would just prefer you work on something
I'm with you
new,
there,
which that's what bothers me about remakes. However, I don't believe in sacred cows. I don't think there's games that can't or shouldn't be remade because they were too good. I think Dead Space is a great game. If you like Dead Space, you can go play the old version. There existing a new version of it does not mean that, you know, it's being overwritten or whatever. So I'm okay with classics getting remade, and I don't have the same sacred cows as most people. I specifically don't think Dead Space 1 is a sacred cow because I think there's a lot of problems with that game. It's good. It was especially good for the time. It is one of the best horror games ever. I'm excited to replay it. But I think if you tried to remake that game with better graphics in 2022, it would probably get flamed because people would be like, oh, it's not as good as I remember. Isaac isn't as much of a character as I remember. There's, you know, pacing stuff. There's game design stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff that probably needs to be changed. So I am going to give them a flyer. I'm going to say your game looks good. I'm excited to see what your take on it is. And if it is worse than Dead Space OG, you're going to get destroyed because people are really like that game. And it is a sacred cow to a lot of people, but it is totally within your kind of prerogative if you want to remake a classic game. And I think that isn't such a bad idea. And I'm excited to see how it ends up. I think it looks good so far. I don't know what the story means. I don't know. Fully voiced makes me happy. I like that. I don't like the silent protagonist trope as much as some people. So we'll see what happens.
Got to come up with good reasons why he's.
Well, I think they have to come up with good reasons why he doesn't talk in the first one. Because I'm not a talk to myself type of guy, but if I was going through that, I'd be talking. That's all I gotta say. I would have some more. Oh, really? For sure, dude. If you're getting hunted down by aliens, you guys wouldn't be like, oh, you know, like freaking out with yourself. I would be talking.
Like you're not talking like Horizon Forbidden West levels. Like
no, not that.
Yeah, okay.
But I would like to see. I think it's crazy that you would go through all that and just make no noise. that to me is inhuman. Like, yeah. Anyway,
so you're confident that they didn't Aloy him?
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they didn't. I know there's a lot of dialogue in there, but I think that they were just trying to show off that there's dialogue. I think it was.
There's a lot of dialogue in that demo.
There's a lot of dialogue in that demo. I agree. If they Aloy him and he's going like, I should go down that hallway every single time you see a hallway.
Bad,
I think I need to find some way to get up there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, my dude.
I'll be upset, but I would. I would like to play as a character in a game that is, that's all I have to say. And I don't think Isaac was much of a character in one. He was basically a zombie on a quest for.
Are you more enthused about the dialogue show off from the Dead Space demo or the dialogue show off from the Starfield stuff we saw this week?
Starfield.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it did look, for folks that didn't see, it did look like they were returning to some of the Bethesda roots with like various pluses and minuses and mini games.
That made me happy. That made me very happy. So I'm more excited. But I don't think it's that bad. I'm excited to play Dead Space. I don't have I don't think you can screw up a game that exists and that I can go and play on my Xbox Series X today. You know what I mean? Like,
I was actually going to ask that. Is Dead Space
if I don't like your game, I'll just play the old one. Like, it's easy.
Is Dead Space available on modern consoles right now?
Yes.
I haven't been looking for it.
It's not only it's on. I don't know if it's Game Pass, but I think
it's on EA Access. Yeah.
EA Access. That's what it is, which is part of Game Pass. So and it runs at I think 100 FPS and has a 4K upres. So it's like you can play that game. Like if you don't like the remake, just play the old one.
And I'm in agreement with you, Travis, on the remake. It doesn't kill the old version. So I'm in agreement with you. My one concern with that when you said that was, well, if the company decides to not allow it to be played on stuff that's currently available instead of making you buy that remake, then I have a problem. But if that's not the case, then I don't care.
Yeah, and they're not doing that. It looks like Dead Space is here to stay, the OG version. So
all right. Well, then I really have no qualms about it. I'm not terribly enthused about that demo, but we will see how it goes. Did
you like Dead Space originally?
Yes, I like Dead Space.
Okay.
I like Dead Space 1 and 2.
Are you going to buy that helmet?
I'm not going to buy that helmet. I know I said I'm Ains today, but I'm not buying that helmet.
Come on, man. Commit. Full commit, Ains. Go for it.
No.
Looks terrible.
All right. And then there's the last topic today. If folks didn't see, there was a series of, I believe it was only Twitter, but it was probably on other social media as well. A series of videos put forth by the original Bayonetta voice actor. who is I'm very sorry because this came up so soon and Ains didn't have it in his outline for me to go over because he's very controlling on this stuff. Is that her name was, I believe, Hellena and then something, and I apologize. Went out on a series of videos
Hellena
and
Taylor. I think is her name.
Taylor. All right,
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Travis. Went out with a series of videos basically saying, you may have heard that I'm not the voice of Bayonetta. That's been replaced by Jennifer Hale, very famous voice actor in video games. And you may have heard that. You may have heard I couldn't do it by schedule, et cetera, et cetera. And then she goes out with what we might call on the internet the tea, which is very rare for professionals because they're under non-disclosure requirements. And because generally speaking, you don't publicize negotiations or negotiation elements. And she says the final offer made to her for the work in Bayonetta was $4,000, and that is immoral, and that you should boycott the purchase of Bayonetta. Now, actually, and I have some issues with this messaging, but she actually says if you don't want to boycott, you don't have to. But for those of you that care about people, and then continues, which I don't think is a fair rhetorical move. But we could talk about that. Did you guys see this news item happen yesterday?
Of course.
Travis,
I think everybody got blocked by.
I'm learning about it in real time, and I mean it's
okay.
Drama. It's the Twitter drama that I think it's not that I have things muted or anyone blocked. I have 0 words muted, 0 blocked, but I think Twitter knows I don't give a crap, and so it just doesn't show me any of the stuff. Like I didn't learn about your drama this week or anything. I just don't. It doesn't show up on my feed.
About.
Yeah.
Hoeg definitely wasn't trending. That was not a thing that happened. Okay.
Yeah, I just don't see that stuff in my feed. I think they just have the algorithm has learned that I'm not biting on any of that stuff. So
good.
I didn't see this. But
all right, so it's about 6 minutes of video. I do recommend checking it out. I will probably talk about it, if not today, then tomorrow. Usually I don't do virtual legalities on the weekends, but it is one of those things where I think we could talk about both the reporting on it, which so just to kind of set the stage here, she says it was $4,000. You might recall that it was never mentioned that it was a kind of salary dispute by Platinum. What they had said was that it was a scheduling issue back in the day. She refutes that entirely and says that they're liars. She also then has like a sequence in these videos where she kind of gets mad at, I guess, Jennifer Hale's been signing his Bayonetta, I guess.
I don't know if she has, but
I think it sounded like she thought she had. I don't know.
It sounded like she was like, you can't, because you're not her.
You can't sign his Bayonetta because it's my character. And there's a whole lot of things. This is what I want to piece all of this out, because it's like, so the voice actress is obviously not the animator, is not the game designer. That's a part of it. But she claims ownership of Bayonetta. I think that some of that is fair when you're the actor of something and some character, but there's clearly emotionality kind of built into this. And the one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the reporting is that for the most part, our dear colleagues in gaming coverage went out there with this is true, Platinum lied, and like no greater kind of analysis of the situation. And as a lawyer and as a guy that has a headline show, one of the things that always bugs me is like, all right, you now have 2 diametrically opposed positions. The job is not to go out there and say this one is now true because that is what I think happens in the video game industry or whatnot. But to go over, okay, we have diametrically opposed positions. It's time to get investigative. And that doesn't appear to be happening here. Travis, just knowing, as I described it, with the understanding that getting a third-hand, summary of events is inherently biasing, and because I'm picking the specifics that I remember. Yeah. Do you ever run into this when you're either reading articles, not at IGN, we don't need to bring IGN into this, but just in general about like something happening out there in the world and them taking it as truth value now, as opposed to kind of considering that, okay, if there's this kind of opposition, yeah, somebody's being untruthful, but not looking at it closely enough, because that's the kind of thing that bothers me, and I might be alone in that.
Well, I think internet literacy really matters, and it should be taught in schools. And I think a lot of people don't have it, which is unfortunate. But when I look at people talking about things, the first thing I do is I consider A, the source, and B, what is the medium by which they're delivering the news. If it is a news article presented by a site that I trust, then I know that I can take that as pretty well reported, and at least they did their best to get to the bottom of what was true and what was false and that sort of thing.
Homework.
Correct. A modicum of homework. But if I see it on one of those sites and it's labeled as just sort of like an editorial, it's just Paul Tassi talking, shooting from the hip about what he thinks is going on in the industry. That's
Names
not
have been named.
Well, I mean, Paul's my friend, and
I like
does,
Paul too.
Yeah, he does news, but he also does sort of like, hey, here's just my vibe on what I think's going on with this latest development, and that is what I would call editorializing. Editorializing is different. It's not reported. It's just kind of him talking about what's going on, and I think that content is valuable. And the good news about it is it doesn't require independent verification, and you can get somebody's response in real time and kind of get a summary of what's going on. So that's useful stuff. But I think
if true,
correct. Yeah. If people read an editorial article and think, oh, well, this is well reasoned and like this is hard news, this is just fact, then that is sort of on the reader more than it is on the outlet that's presenting the information. I think literacy on like how to digest news and what sources to trust and which ones to take as fact and not is the onus is on the reader. I just think that's true. We should teach it more, but it is on the reader. And then there's the other part of it, which is that when people are online, they're representing themselves in addition to their company. And so if they're tweeting it, the tweet is probably just them confirming their own biases and giving their editorialized opinion, not them reporting the news, unless you know that they use their Twitter exclusively to promote news, which some people do. Most people don't, though. I think it's safe to say, even if you're seeing a news reporter talking about something on Twitter, they're sort of in between reporting news, and they're kind of a little bit of editorial, a little bit of them kind of working on news and that sort of thing. And so I would just encourage people to before taking things as fact or whatever, just sort of think on what the purpose of the medium is and the person speaking and what the article actually is labeled as, whether it's news or an editorial piece and that sort of thing. That said, I would 100% expect every single person on Twitter who works for IGN, I'll even say IGN, I don't care.
I wasn't going to put you in that position.
Yeah, but I know you wouldn't, but this is something I'm happy to talk about because it's it's true. Everybody there, they have opinions, and it's actually one of the things I love about the company is that people are free to speak their opinions and they have a slant, and I think that is sort of, it's good in a certain sense. It's good if you're writing editorial pieces and you're a personality. It's bad if you're reporting news and you have to learn to put it behind you when you're reporting news. And I think our team's good at doing that. But when they're on Twitter, they are themselves and they let you see who they are. And of course, if they see an article like this, it's going to immediately confirm biases that they already have about what's going on in the industry and that sort of thing, which I would fully expect it to. So interesting conversation, not at all the type of thing I'm interested in or would read about or comment on, but I can only imagine what everybody who works in my industry was tweeting. I think
you probably, if you just you conjure it in your head,
exactly. In my head, I'm just immediately like, oh yeah, so it was them just going like, this is classic game industry capitalism.
There's a lot of thoughts on various economic, which is one of the reasons I wanted to ask you on a substantive level. We'll start with Dan on this. $4,000, voice actress, lead character, title character. Does it offend your conscience? / are we willing to attach immorality to it?
I mean, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I don't. I mean, that seems like, especially for an established character, an established series, a very popular series, a company that is funded by, the games being funded by what, probably Nintendo, if I were to guess.
Nintendo's definitely funding Platinum on this. Yeah.
So a trillion, billion, whatever dollar company. Yeah. That's ridiculous.
Okay. If back off the trillions on Nintendo.
I don't know. I don't know what they make. They make a lot of money. They've got the money. So
they do. Corporations in general have more money than they've ever had.
So
we just got to get the scope right. That's all.
Okay. We'll get the scope. We'll narrow it down a little bit. We'll say billions.
Billions.
They've got a lot of money. This is. I mean, if I were her, and this is assuming this is 100% true what she's saying, I will give the benefit of the doubt. But I'm also a fan of hearing it out, the same as you. Kind of get evidence. I guess is what I'm looking at here. Yeah, I mean, she mentioned something in her video about asking them about this Platinum Games, or was it Hideki or whatever his name is?
She went straight to Kamiya.
Yeah, she went straight to Camilla. So it sounded like they emailed back and forth. So I would think if she's not worried, like she said, about an NDA or breaking any kind of NDA because she has nothing, what are they going to do? Take her clothes, I think is what she said. Then why not say, hey, here's the email where they said all of this stuff that I just said, plus the $4,000 offer or whatever. And I'm not saying that she's not being truthful.
Double
I just
down
don't
on breaking that NDA for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if she's gonna break it, then just go for it.
She already did break
put
it.
them
I
on,
mean, like...
yeah. Well, put them on blast, right? Show them that they're, this is what they're doing.
Can I say honestly what I think is happening there, Dan?
Yeah, go for it.
There's a lot of notable information that you would want to know if you were going to evaluate this on a kind of
Sure.
morality level. And one of those major things is, what was the job?
Right. Yeah.
We think of it, it's the lead character, it's Bayonetta. What kind of taping did you think was required? What kind of hours were going to be spent? There's multiple main characters in Bayonetta 3. We know that. What does that look like? Because let's say that letter said it's a 10-hour job. It's $400 an hour. I mean, that changes the equation, I think, for people. Now, she presents it the other way. She presents it as they made $450 million on Bayonetta goods. It's like, that's fine. But then you start having that economic question: how many of those sales are we going to lose if we change you out for Jennifer Hale? Right? What is your contribution to the value of that intellectual property? And I know people get uncomfortable with that, and I want to treat people with respect and dignity, but we don't know how much you were being asked to do, and you didn't risk your capital or your house to make Bayonetta a thing. So we talk about risk allocation, we talk about return on investment. And it gets tricky. I know this online because I know if I put this in virtual legality, which I'm probably going to talk about, and I will try to say it with as much sensitivity as I can on these kinds of things, but like labor theory of value is not a thing. You don't get a piece of that marketing because you didn't negotiate for it. And I have an issue with going out there and saying nobody else. She effectively accused Jennifer Hale of being like a strike line jumper.
Gab. Yeah.
I mean, it's like...
That was probably my most hated part.
I don't know that that's fair. I mean, the other aspect of that is like, did Jennifer Hale really get paid less than you? I doubt that. So, there's all these things to take into account. But the very first thing that jumped out at me is like, what was the hours that they were asking for you? Because I could tell you, what my hourly rate is. I could tell how these things go. I could tell you that it doesn't always relate to the project that you're working on, right? I will do a $50 million deal, and if my final bill is $10,000, that's a great day for me. But that deal couldn't get done if I didn't do everything that I did for it. And it's I don't get a percentage of the millions that went into the deal. So it's complicated for me because $4,000, as she mentions it does jump out. It's like, oh, I would have thought that you get a lot more for that. So it's like, that's why you put it in that framework. But you just don't have enough details. And I do try to always take a step back and say, there is a lot of missing information here. And I think, as some people noted, I think Camilla went out with a tweet that was basically "don't believe untruths." Like, it was like a subtweet that some people attached to this story. I don't know if that's fair or not. But it is like, okay, you've got diametrically opposed positions. What do you want to do with it? And I do think, to a man and woman, with some exceptions, I actually highlighted one that I really thought was great from, and I want to say Nicole Carpenter at Polygon, that actually put out in the tweet that was, this is what she says, and then goes over it. And I said, this is how you report this. This is how you do this, because because my timeline is just, unlike you, Travis, I haven't taught Twitter properly. My timeline is just, exactly what the tweets were.
Yeah, I know what it was. And I mean, that's what Twitter's for, though, right? I don't think Twitter's the place for reporting the news. I think unless you have a news.
Well, you need to tell your audience then, because that's where audiences are going and getting news. So I mean,
correct. And I think that's on the audience for getting news on Twitter. If you want to get news on Twitter, follow the news outlets because they'll post it when it's news. But I think if you're following the editors and you're looking at their personal thoughts in real time on Twitter and treating that as news because they work in news, you're illiterate when it comes to internet news. That's all I'd have to say.
Okay. But that sounds a lot like absolving the outlets of all responsibility.
Oh, I mean, their reporting, you should hold them accountable 100%. I think holding them accountable on Twitter for the things they say as individuals is not, that's not news. Twitter.
That's why everybody's got, my opinions are my own on their little bio.
Yeah,
top,
exactly. So, if you don't understand that's what happens on Twitter, then I would encourage you to, take a internet news literacy course. They exist. I mean, that's just my opinion on it. People can be whatever they want to be on Twitter. I choose to be nothing. That's
Hey,
mine.
you know that I am sympathetic to that notion. I try
Yeah,
to help.
and
people
you are
understand
highly
all that.
literate on this stuff, and I think the reason you get offended at it is because you know that not everyone is, and you see them reading these trusted news tweets and taking it for fact. And I get that. That is super frustrating, but I'm more mad at the people who take it for fact rather than the people who are tweeting. The people tweeting are they're just being them. That's what you do on Twitter.
I can understand that. I can understand. Yeah, I would like to hold some of your colleagues to a higher level of responsibility.
I mean, on Twitter, I think that's not the venue for it. If you have a comment on a news article on IGN that you think was reported erroneously, I think that is 100% like go to war on that. And I'm sure
I've done that. I've had those interactions with Dan.
I'm sure you've done that. That's that is. I will be your brother in arms on that, because I think reported news should be held to a very high standard. I don't think tweets should be. I think Twitter is a place. It's a forum for people to scream whatever they want in the streets, and you don't have to get a second corroborating source to send a tweet. That's what I think. So as for the is it immoral to pay somebody $4,000? I would say it's certainly not immoral to offer to pay them $4,000, to which they can say no. It's certainly within both parties' rights to walk away from the deal if they're not willing to pay more. I don't think that she is owed the part, or unless there's some contract I'm unaware of that says so.
No, she didn't claim that.
Yeah, and I also don't think that she's necessarily immoral herself, or NDAs. You can break NDAs, and you can break laws. In fact, I would argue it's your obligation to break laws if you disagree with them and think that you're willing to accept responsibility. This is, of course, where Hoeg and I most disagree in our worldviews, which is I have no respect for laws. To me, laws are just things that people tell you to do that you absolutely you actually have a moral obligation to break laws if you disagree with them and you think it's worth the effort to do so. There's a lot of cool people who broke laws. You guys ever hear of Martin Luther King Jr.? He's a cool dude. He broke a bunch of laws. So I think NDAs, if you're willing to accept the consequences of them, you can break them. That's totally fine. Laws aren't gospel.
Well, NDA is technically not a law, right? It's a contractual commitment.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a contractual commitment which you can break if you're willing to suffer the consequences written in the NDA. It doesn't say you can't break me. It just says if you do break me, here's the consequences. And
yeah, I mean, I'd say she's never getting a job in the industry again. I mean, that's the choice. That's one of the choices that you make.
Possibly, yeah. So you have to be willing to suffer the consequences of doing so. But the reason laws have consequences attached to them if you don't follow them is because specifically you don't have to follow the laws if you don't want to.
Oh my goodness. Well, this is an entire course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a philosophical discussion.
Whether penalties are transactional or not. It's the nature of things. It's like, can you murder someone if 30 years is a good price for you?
Yeah, you
can.
Can.
Kind of
That's
class you take at law school.
Yeah.
So
I would argue
you,
absolutely can. That's why they wrote the consequences attached to the law. That's if you're willing to pay the consequences, you can do it. You got to be willing to. You got to be willing to suffer the consequences.
And on that note, it's been a wonderful.
I just love seeing a lawyer squirm at somebody. This is the thing. I have no respect for authority, and Hoeg is, he's nested in mother authority, as a lawyer, and so it's just it's very funny to see him squirm when somebody just has complete irreverence toward authority figures.
I believe there are proper and improper ways to handle effective change, and that thinking about laws and penalties as transactional is probably not the best thing for a philosophically sturdy society. But I will allow you your thoughts because that's who I am. So, an awesome Bitcast, everybody. Dan, why don't you tell people what you're going to be up to this week? If you want to see anybody ever again, whether they can follow you someplace. I know you have a big Instagram fashion influencing empire.
I have one picture on my Instagram. I can't even remember what the account is.
That is one more than me.
Yeah. I'm going to go, I don't know, steal some stuff.
Okay.
Because the hell with it. Yeah.
Because of the transactions.
Yeah. I'm just going to go grab a bunch of stuff at the store real quick. And you know,
that's Travis's town that you can do that in, not every town.
Yeah, I'll just break into the Walgreens and I get you. No, I got nothing. Check out Season Gaming for some great stuff that Hoeg will talk about here shortly.
Yes. On that note, Ains will be back next week. We talked about that. They've got reviews pending at Season Gaming for Plague Tale, Gotham Knights, and more. There's a current Overwatch 2 discussion with Jeff Grubb on the channel. If you don't know who Jeff Grubb is, mostly he leaks things to people and helps Giant Bomb traverse its many and varied private equity and hedge fund acquirers. And so you could check out that interview. And he's also going to be covering the Halo World Championship. That's what Ains is going to be doing. So follow that. And you could say anything you want about him right now because he's currently on a plane.
Yes.
He's old and bald.
Yeah. Travis?
He's old and bald.
When can we expect your reviews to hit? And, of course, your white paper treatise on transactional law and the nature of society and man.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a Plague Tale review that's going to be live tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific. I've got the review of Gotham Knights coming out on Thursday at 4 a.m. I believe is the deadline for that. And hopefully I'll hit the embargo. I'm still, in the process of writing the review.
Sure.
And then I've got Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed, which I had to put that review on hold. And I probably will not finish it until after the game is out. So unfortunately, I'll be a little bit late on that one.
Finish your review because it's just a multiplayer game, right?
No, actually, it's a story. It has a story.
Right.
It has a story mode that goes along with it. So I need to finish the story and get through it. But I'm going to get to that late. So if you are curious about that one, I'll probably tweet out some of my thoughts early and maybe have a review in progress as soon as I can.
Nice.
And then I'll finish it at some point. So I need to get that one. You can follow me on Twitter at TyGuyTravis, where you can hear me talking about following laws that I disagree with. For everything else, stick with IGN. I can't get through it.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, folks, you know where to find me already. YouTube, Hoeg Law for virtual legalities, hangouts and headlines, and lawyers and dragons, as well as at Hoeg Law on Twitter for all of the best and most important thoughts on the Michigan Wolverines' continued undefeated campaign. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us in Bitcast. Please leave a like on your way out. That's really nice. Everybody really appreciates that. Otherwise, have a great week, and we'll put Ains back in this chair as of next week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.